once you've done that bit, that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's fine. Thank you, Convener. Good morning, everybody, to this meeting of the Public Protection Committee. Please note that the public section of the meeting is to be recorded and published online for public access at a later time following the meeting. Can all attendees switch off their cameras and mute their microphones during the meeting? When not speaking, the camera and microphone should only be switched on when you are invited to speak by the convener. You should use the raise the hand symbol to indicate your desire to speak. Otherwise, use the chat facility and we'll observe your comments in there. I'll now ask all members to confirm their attendance through a roll call to confirm we're quorate, and this will also be recorded in the minute. Councillor Stewart, convener.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dunbar.
Good morning, Derek. I'm here.
Good morning. Councillor Allard.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Councillor Duncan.
Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Gregg.
Here.
Morning. Councillor Houghton.
Morning, Derek. Hi, Convener.
Good morning. Councillor McGregor has intimated his apologies and is substituted by Councillor Cameron.
Good morning, Derek. Thank you.
Good morning. Councillor Townsend.
Good morning.
Councillor Phelan.
Good morning.
And Mr. Bell, the Executive Lead.
Good morning, Convener and Derek.
Good morning. Chief Superintendent MacDonald of Police Scotland.
Good morning.
Good morning, Convener, Derek and all.
Good morning. And Area Commander Bruce Farquharson of Scottish Fire and Rescue Service.
Good morning, Convener. Good morning, Derek, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. That's everybody accounted for.
Okay, then we'll just get started. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending our meeting of the Public Protection Committee of what's just thinking is the 28th of April today. So thank you for that. We have quite a lot on the agenda today, as we had anticipated from the previous meeting. So we'll just go through the items on the agenda as we would normally. So there is no notification of urgent business, termination of exempt business. I don't think there's any declarations of interest unless that's changed. I'm just going to take that as there's no declaration of interest. Oh, there is a hand. Councillor Dunbar.
Thank you, Convener. For the child poverty report, I'd like to declare interest there. I sit on the board of CFINE.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm sure that can be recorded in the minute through Derek. Thank you very much. Is there any other any other declaration of interests? I'm not seeing any hands, but that's fine. Thank you. We have no deputations. The minute of the previous meeting, pages 7 to 12. Is there any comments from anyone? Are you happy with the minute?
Happy.
Thank you. Thank you. Actually, just before I go on to the committee planner, which I will actually be referring to Derek, it's a little bit of remiss of me not to have welcomed those that are subbing for others on the committee today. So Councillor Cameron, you're most welcome. I'm sure there'll be some items that you will find of interest with your own particular vigilance, so welcome. Derek, would you like to take us through the committee planner, please?
Thank you, Convener. A bit of a sticky microphone and headset there just now. The committee planner is before yourselves, very much updated and populated from our last meeting to indicate going forward for this session on the 28th of April. All reports that were anticipated are on today's agenda and indicated on the planner there. Moving forward to our next meeting, it is also looking slightly healthier and we have some reports there. I would indicate, as we've discussed, Convener, that members could still be suggesting some topics for future thematic reporting by police, fire, and indeed by any of the council services that they feel they require assurance on. That is really a high-level overview of the planner, Convener, if you're satisfied with that.
Yes, thank you. I do see Councillor Townsend, so I will bring him in a moment. has raised his hand, but I think it was been very helpful that we had a meeting post our last committee with Chief Superintendent George MacDonald, and also with Bruce Farquharson, to discuss various reports that we could bring to the committee, and that was quite thoroughly discussed based on the suggestions from the members. So I'm very grateful for that, and it actually gives us a steer in leading the committee forward. Now you're going to hear my phone ringing, and I suppose I'm going to apologise, and hopefully someone else in the house is going to pick up the phone. This is just, I suppose, reflective of how we're all working just now. You know, so I'm just going to have to try and keep it off. I do apologise, but there's nothing I can do about that. Councillor Townsend, you wanted to come in, or you would like to come in?
Yeah, thank you very much, Convener. It's just to briefly say, to reiterate what you've said, and I'm very impressed with the planner as it's moving forward, and thank you for all the efforts I've gone. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Townsend. I'm always very grateful for the contributions that you've made, because you've made some really good suggestions in the reports that have come to through the police in particular. So thank you for that. Okay, so if we can move on, with no notices of motion, and there aren't any referrals from any other council committee or subcommittees. Now, normally we'd have the police and fire immediately first, but because we are living in the sort of pandemic that we are living in, and it's still there for a long time, I felt it was important that we actually brought the protective services up the agenda, to give them also recognition for all the work that they have done and are continuing to do. So, but the first on the item, God, I'm having a bit of a hiccup today with the computer. But the first on would be the building standards report, which is Mr. Spence. So, Mr. Spence, would you like to? Obviously, we're looking at the recommendations. Would you want to give us a brief update on the report, or anything you would like to say?
Yes, thank you, Convener, and good morning. So this report is the Building Standards 6 monthly assurance report, confirming the service's statutory requirements in securing public safety in relation to buildings found to be dangerous, and also using our enforcement powers in relation to unauthorised building work or occupation of buildings. Appendix 1 in the report just highlights previous activity with notices which have been served during the reporting period, or indeed closed during that period, or are still outstanding. In short, there were 3 notices served during the period. Of those 3, one was for the Hazelhead Cafe fire, and 2 further notices related to a premises in Hollybank Place, and 1 notice has been closed. So there remains 27 notices outstanding. I can confirm that where any premises has an outstanding notice, we continue to monitor that premises in terms of public safety until a satisfactory conclusion is reached. So there's certainly no danger to the public. And just finally, the most recent lockdown has restricted our activity once again, but I can confirm we've continued to operate our 24-hour call-out service and assisted the police and fire service when requested. And since Monday past, we're able to carry out inspections again, so we're working our way through a backlog there. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Mr. Spence. I would just say at the onset, I want to thank you for all the work that your team has done, particularly through these challenging times, and that you have continued to operate the emergency 24-hour emergency dangerous building service as well, and collaborating with the police and fire services. So thank you for that. Please do pass that on to all those that are involved. I think it's always good to thank and be encouraged from that, I hope. I see Councillor Houghton has his hands up, and think it's Councillor Cameron as well. So Councillor Houghton first.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, Mr. Spence. It was just a sort of brief question. Perhaps you could provide comment. You may have seen, I think it's in one of the local journals a couple of weeks ago, a story about concerns over masonry and stuff that might be falling. Is it possible you could just kind of provide commentary on how you're made aware of where you kind of get your information on buildings that may be at risk? Is it largely through just public reporting, or do you maintain a log, of buildings that you kind of check on a routine basis? It'd be good just to have that information out there. Thanks.
Yes, certainly, and thanks for that. The Building Standards Service don't carry out any direct inspections of privately owned properties, so we do rely on reports which come from various areas. It's often from the police or the fire service, or members of the public, or indeed the council's own private sector housing team do carry out some inspections and will highlight what they think might be something dangerous to ourselves to take action.
Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Thanks for the response. I have Councillor Cameron next, and then I think it's Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Convener. My question is kind of along the same line. So instead of asking the question again, I'll do it as a supplementary. Very recently, there was a masonry fall in Rosemount, which thankfully nobody was injured, but certainly could have been. And my question really was, and Mr. Spence has answered it to a certain extent, but my question really is around the fact that the reports are the reports of reactive enforcement and reactive operations. Are we thinking moving forward, because we do have a lot of Victorian buildings in Aberdeen, especially in the city centre, with some wonderful greenery growing out of it. Are we thinking, or could we be thinking about moving forward with some proactive work in this rather than just being reactive?
Mr. Spence?
Yeah, thank you. Certainly the Building Standards Service has traditionally been a reactive service in line with the statutory obligation that we have. It is very much in the case of tenements that the owners are responsible for their own building and should obviously maintain and have it inspected periodically to highlight any issues. What I can say, just to make the committee aware, is that Scottish Government have commissioned a cross-party working group. That group is titled the Working Group on Maintenance of Tenement Scheme Properties. They've been assisted by the RICS in producing a report, which that report has a number of recommendations. It was produced in June 2019. Those recommendations are that each tenement must have an owners association appointed, that there's a requirement that tenements are inspected every 5 years by a qualified person and a report produced with costed maintenance for that tenement, and also the formation of a building reserve fund to support maintenance of tenements, because in many cases affordability in maintaining these properties is an issue. And the report, the recommendation is that the reports that are produced will be linked to the home report for conveyancing purposes. So nationally, there's an effort being made to introduce legislation to cover these tenement properties, because there certainly appears to be a gap in terms of maintenance. But I think all I confirm is that building standards are a reactive service and traditionally have been. Hope that helps.
No, through you, Convener. Thank you very much, Mr. Spence. That certainly does help. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Convener. So just a very briefest of question as regards the catch-up. Can there be any indication of timescale of the matters being caught up with, if you like.
Yeah,
Response?
certainly it's difficult to put a time scale, and there will always be notices outstanding in any reporting period, and there can be various reasons for that. So, for example, if I use the fire at Dizzy's on Carden Place, which took place in 2019, I think it was. After that fire, we served a notice requesting that they seek a structural appraisal of the building that remained, and also secure the site and make good. Now, the appraisal has been completed and the site is secure and safe, but the notice cannot be closed until either the building is demolished or, as is proposed, rebuilt. So the notice therefore remains outstanding for quite a period of time for that reason. So there will always be notices outstanding there. But I think the important thing is that we do monitor these outstanding notices and at the right time bring them to a successful resolution.
Okay, thanks for that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I think that's actually quite helpful. So it's not faults not lying with the council. It's on those that are requiring to get work done, as you've highlighted with the disease building. Okay, members, could I just ask you to agree the recommendations at 2.1? Are you happy with that?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Spence.
Thank you.
Right, so we're moving on to agenda item 10, which is the protective services, a COVID-19 update, environmental health and trading standards. Mr. Morrison, I know you're going to speak to the report, but also, can't get my words out here, obviously tell us what the situation is, because you've been in the front line. I don't want to see the firing line, but perhaps that is really true with your staff of 20, I think you've said to me. And obviously with things opening up on Monday, I'm sure you have some information to tell us that that the committee really would like to hear. So the floor is yours. I wanted you to feel that the committee also recognise how important it is for how we're living, and that's why I wanted you to be at the almost top of the agendas.
Great, thank you, convener. Thank you. Yes, I'll start with summarising the report before you, and then give an update of issues that have risen since the report was drafted.
Thank you.
The report before you this morning is an update on the activity of both environmental health and trading standards in relation to the business restrictions since the report I submitted in October to the committee, and it supplements the verbal update I gave last month as well. We're continuing to follow the 4E's approach to enforcement, with engagement, education and encouragement being primary processes, and enforcement only being reserved for those occasions where we have been unable to achieve the outcomes.
I think we've lost your sound.
Sorry about that. Somehow it jumped back onto mute. I apologise for that.
I know, it's okay. I'm having issues too this morning.
Right. Yes, we're continuing to follow a 4E's approach to enforcement, with formal enforcement being reserved for only those occasions where the other mechanisms haven't achieved the desired ends. And since October, as mentioned last month, we have only required formal enforcement on 5 occasions, 4 of those relating to the Scotland-Serbia match, and 1 for a business that was trading when it wasn't supposed to be. As we've progressed through lockdown, our focus has changed as appropriate. So in the run-up to Christmas, we were focused heavily on retail and hospitality. Since the moving into level 4 at Christmas, the focus was on takeaways and supermarkets, as pretty much the only businesses that were trading. And since, as we've been moving towards the reopening, our focus again has moved to supporting those businesses that are being permitted to reopen. We've also been continuing to ensure that those hotels being used for the managed isolation of international travellers have appropriate and effective controls in place, and are continuing to work with our colleagues in the public health team of NHS Grampian to investigate and control any clusters of cases that occur. We also continue to provide participate in national liaison arrangements, and we are key players in ensuring that there is a consistency and a proportionality in the approach across Scotland, and are also heavily involved with colleagues in Scottish Government in providing support and advice in relation to the regulations and the guidance to ensure that they are both effective and proportionate. Obviously, this work that we've been doing in relation to COVID has necessitated a withdrawal of work in other areas. And some of that includes some of our statutory functions. However, that has been done on a prioritisation basis, with all high priority tasks still taking place. So high risk public health, etc. We have continued to divert resource to that, but COVID has been the primary responsibility of the service. Since the report was drafted, clearly things have moved forward quite considerably. On the 5th of April, we had hairdressers and barbers being allowed to trade from fixed premises. And ahead of that, we did a lot of engagement with the sector to make sure they were fully aware of the requirements. And subsequent to the 5th, we have been doing assessments of those controls. And it's clear that most of those businesses had put in place controls. However, there were still some issues, primarily relating to ventilation. Ventilation is one of the biggest control measures we have available, and is coming more to the fore. Earlier in the pandemic, we didn't understand that aerosol transmission was important as it is, and therefore good ventilation in these premises is an absolute requirement. Another area where there has appeared to be some confusion relates to things like beard trims, which requires the removal of a face covering. That is not currently permitted, and we are taking measures to ensure that barbers are not undertaking those services. Obviously, from this Monday, we had the biggest reopening to date, with large sectors of the economy opening up, including gyms and swimming pools, leisure activities, museums, libraries, retail, tourist accommodation, and of course hospitality. So a huge area of sectors opening up. Most of those sectors, the rules have remained fairly similar to when they locked down. However, there have been quite some considerable changes for hospitality. Therefore, in the run up to Monday, a focus was on providing that information to the hospitality sector to ensure they could put things in place, including a webinar that was delivered last week at short notice and had about 150 people represented. It's also getting on our website and having lots of views. So hopefully that's a very useful resource to the sector. Since Monday, we've had officers out on the street working with colleagues in Police Scotland. On Monday, we undertook about 150 assessments of premises. And again, similarly to what I mentioned with barbers, very good levels of controls being implemented. Some confusion still relating to the requirement for households to physically distance even within a group. There appears to be some misunderstanding amongst the general public that although you are allowed to mix 6 people from up to 6 households in outdoor spaces, including in outdoor hospitality, those individual households still need to maintain that 1 metre distancing. So we're working with businesses and with partners to try and promote that message to make certain that people are aware that that is a vital control. We're going to continue with our assessment visits this week, including joint visits with the police, and we will be working evenings and weekends to ensure that we're able to provide that support to the business sector as need be. And now we are also starting to prepare for the next stage of reopening on the 17th of May, when hopefully we will get to move to level 2. Okay, that's really my update, convener, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for those updates. I invite members of the committee if they have any questions. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you very much, convener. I've got a couple of questions. I've got some questions on EU exit, but I think they're more appropriate when we get to that item in the agenda, because obviously in this report, Mr. Morrison has made sort of almost bullet point reference. There's much more detail in the other one. So if you're comfortable with that, I'd rather leave them till later. But I have got two specific questions related to this report. On page 25, I noticed, Mr. Morrison, that you are providing the environmental health and trading standards input to the Grampian Local Resilience Partnership on behalf of the 3 local authorities. I'm sure you're more than capable of doing this and doing an excellent job, but it occurs to me that the issues are different within the 3 local authorities. And I noticed this morning, for example, that Moray has got something like 6 times as many cases in the last 7 days as Aberdeenshire has, and Aberdeen City is about twice Aberdeen. Is there a problem in dealing with this, or is that a red herring I've put up, not intentionally?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Councillor. It isn't really a problem. We're liaising and working with our colleagues across the 3 authorities. It is really just to ensure that the representation at the LRP isn't too large. So we're taking those issues from our colleagues and passing it up the chain as appropriate, and actions are being delivered locally by the various services as appropriate. So it isn't an additional burden upon us. We would be there in our own right, and we're just passing on, acting as a conduit to ensure that information is there. And of course, there are representatives from those other authorities at the LRP, but not the direct environmental health and trading standards representatives.
Oh, great, that's super. That was my one question. One other question is in relation to the UCAS accreditation of the laboratory. I note that they have actually submitted their action plan, and my experience of UCAS, you've got very tight timescales, and I wondered if they had heard back from UCAS and that their accreditation had been granted. Isn't the right word, because I've already got it. The reapproval has been granted.
Yep. I think the current position, we're still just waiting for final confirmation from UCAS that they are happy with the action plan that we have submitted, and we expect to have the full update for the next committee on the UCAS accreditation.
Well, that's okay, good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
thank you, Councillor Cameron. Councillor, was it Councillor Allard, or have I missed that? Derek, can you see if it is Councillor Allard? Hello, welcome.
Yes, thanks very much, Convener. I've got a few questions, one on Scottish election, one on EU exit, and one observation on the Appendix 1 on page 31. Do you want me to ask them all together separately?
We'll just deal with the issues pertaining to this report. The EU exit, we would, are you referring to the last paper?
EU exit on 3.18 and 3.19.
Both in the same report. Yeah, well, yes, you can ask your questions.
Do you want me to ask them together or separately?
Yeah. Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Together, okay. First of all, thanks very much, Mr. Morrison, and thanks very much for all the staff for the work who's been done. I've seen that the regulation have been amended 19 times, so it's been a very, very difficult time for everybody working long hours, and over the weekend, and of course, folk as well in the laboratory have done a fantastic work. In very, very difficult time. I've seen the Scottish election coming in page 26, 3.15. I just wanted to have some reassurance that not only voters will be kept in a safe way, but as well the volunteers who are participating, and of course officers who are going from polling station to polling station. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that?
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Councillor. Our input is providing our support to the elections unit, ensuring that they've got effective controls in place. So the election unit themselves have implemented those controls, and we're just providing our support to that team to ensure that they are able to deliver a safe election, both for voters and the staff and volunteers who are participating.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the volunteer part of it. On the EU exit 3.18, 3.18 and 3.19. I just wanted to have some maybe some precision about what's happening with Aberdeen Harbour, because of course there will be extra documentation. A lot of the rules have been changed because of the UK leaving the EU. So how much are we on the top of that, and how safe it is? Have we got enough officers? We don't want them to work overtime or weekends. And the second part is on the 3.19 is how much the export certification as attestation to support certification of export at export hubs. Are we managing to respond to the demand to keep the flow of fresh food exports safely? Because I'm particularly concerned about a lot of them being perishable goods. So there are two aspects to it. Is how we're gonna ended up at one point having problem with exports or imports of perishable goods who are going to not be safe. And on the other hand, we wouldn't want to see a lot of goods discarded because of red tape and documentation of it's not going right. So it'd be good to have some answers into that. And then I'll have an observation to make on Appendix 1.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Regarding Aberdeen Harbour, the implications of the harbour in relation to exports of food are very minimal. Very little of the food gets exported directly through the harbour. Most of it heads further south. Most of it going to the continent goes via Dover. Other stuff goes out via Hull and Newcastle. And then we've obviously got products going out from Stranraer going across to Ireland. So exports wise, very little from there from the harbour. In relation to imports of food, the import requirements haven't. Sorry, excuse me, 2 seconds.
Sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the import requirements haven't kicked in yet. The requirements for import controls will start on the 1st of October for documentary checks, with full import controls coming in from the 1st of January. Again, there will be limited imported food responsibilities from the harbour. There will, however, be an application for the harbour to become a border control post for the importation of animal feed, which will require certification by an official to do that. And we are in the process of working with colleagues in both Food Standards Scotland and Scottish Government to understand the requirements and the demands that will be on the service. It is understood currently that it will be a relatively occasional importation, so not huge ramifications, but we will do what is necessary to support that as an importation hub for feed coming through. Regarding exports of food, primarily for ourselves in Aberdeen, it's fishery products. So again, as you say, perishable products. The majority of our premises are using the export hubs in the Central Belt, where small consignments can be consolidated under one certification and therefore reduce down the burden of red tape and the speed that it can get through the border. So we are supporting that by doing the attestations for approximately a dozen businesses who are involved in that market. And we are providing that service to allow the vets at the certification hubs to sign those certificates. So that's all in process. We also offer a certification service to those that want to send consignments directly from Aberdeen. They are relatively few and primarily relate to larger consignments of primarily frozen product. And we're providing that service to facilitate that. There are still some teething problems with certification, but we are getting those resolved and being able to work with that. And as far as I'm aware, we have had no products that have had to be destroyed or disposed of because of problems with that. Very early January, there were some problems across Scotland with product deteriorating due to the hold-ups. Those problems were pretty much resolved in January, and the system seems to be flowing as well as it can do at the moment.
That's a very full answer, Mr. Morrison. Thank you very much for that. Obviously, a lot of detail. Councillor Allard, you said you also had a comment.
Yeah, on Appendix 1 is regarding the COVID-19 intervention undertaken by the Environmental Health and Trading Standards. And I've seen one of the columns, these inquiries complain about business. And I see that there's been some peak and trough, and some of the peaks have been quite alarming. But I'm more a question of process. Should you have inquiries and complaint on the same column? Or would it be possible to separate them, because it's very difficult to judge when you've got inquiries and complaint on in the same data?
Yeah, I can look to break that data down for future. The reason it's come in as that is we have one portal on the website, and it is used for both those complaints and inquiries. So it's because it's coming in that the simple way to record it was the same, but we can look to break those down for future reporting periods.
Okay,
That would be helpful.
Thank
Thank you very much, Mr.
Yeah,
Wilson.
I could say the majority in the recent period have been inquiries rather than complaints.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And thank you for agreeing to look into that for the next time. So that'd be really helpful. Were you able to say anything about the figures or not, where we're placed in Aberdeen?
So in terms of the COVID figures.
Sorry, yes, back to that, yes.
Okay, yeah, I got information from colleagues in the Grampian Health Protection Unit, obviously because they look after the health side rather than ourselves. And I believe our figures, if you just bear with me 2 moments, the figures that I received yesterday relating to Monday suggest our levels in the week before were 36 cases in Aberdeen, which gave us a rate per 100,000 of about 15.7. Our levels are fluctuating around about that level. Some weeks they're more, some weeks they're less. So we are currently pretty much a sort of steady state.
Okay.
But, you know, clearly it's colleagues in the health protection team that we best placed to answer those kind of questions.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. That's been very helpful. I'm looking just to agree the recommendations unless there's any other members that want to ask anything.
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Morrison, and please pass on our best wishes to your team. I'm sure you said to me there's about a team of 20.
It's a larger team than that, but we don't have everyone available to deal with COVID all the time because we've got people dealing with other areas of high risk work as well.
Well, please pass on our thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, members. Going on to agenda item 11, which is a report complaints about the police, which I think was actually Councillor Townsend that asked for this to be brought to the committee. So we have the Chief Superintendent with us. We'll be looking just to agree the recommendations, but I would say it's good to hear that, that the levels of satisfaction for the police remain high at 72% in line with the national average, and that I think, as I understand it, many of the complaints that there are in many ways related to the drugs and sort of the wider COVID situation that we're actually living in. Chief Superintendent, would you like to come in? I can't actually see you on the screen, but I'm sure you're there somewhere.
Hopefully see me now, Convener.
Yes, hello. Thank you.
Excellent, thanks. Happy to go through the report. Do you want me to provide a little bit of context in terms of just COVID as to where we are, and then I can lead into the report if you're happy with that, Convener?
Yes, absolutely. I was just thrashing on, but yes, do. Okay.
Thanks very much. If members could just indulge me just shortly, and I'll cover just where we are in terms of COVID, and I'm not seeking to cover the repetitive comments in terms of the previous updates. I'm conscious I've updated you this every meeting I've attended.
You have, and thank you for that.
Okay, so in essence, since the start of 2021, possibly only curtailed by the severe weather at key points, demand, I would say, has mostly returned back to what we'd expect. And in general, when you examine our calls for service, they're very much in line with our 3 or 5 year average. So I would suggest it's business as normal in terms of the calls that we're getting and the incidents that we're responding to from the public. As we approach the year end, overall recorded crimes during essentially the pandemic period were down 8% in comparison to the previous year. But members might recall that throughout the period when I've been providing my updates, that generally speaking, between 10 and 12% was the reduction. But as I say, from the start of the calendar year, the end of the fiscal year, we've seen a bit of a return to normality, and hence that reason that figure has dropped down to a solid 8% reduction kind of year on year, which will give members an indication in terms of just, we are almost back to normal in terms of normal behaviours and reporting. As I've shared with members previously, obviously year-on-year comparisons are going to be very difficult for the foreseeable, given that what I've articulated there in terms of reductions and the context of the pandemic. So I will continue to refer to 3 and 5 year baselines in the future, because that was probably more useful and helpful for us in terms of just what normal may actually look like. And again, just to get a little bit of a reassurance, so we're into the new reporting year, the new fiscal year. Almost April has passed us. So in the first 4 weeks of the new reporting year, in pretty much all metrics that we use in terms of measuring crime and incidents, we're in line, if not above, our 5 year average. So I think that would indicate that there has been a fairly swift return to normality in terms of the transactions that the police are seeing and our contact and some of the behaviours that we're dealing with. As has been highlighted previously by members, we're still manoeuvring our way through the pandemic and the roadmap in terms of the economy opening up. It's fair to say that in the coming weeks, as has been touched upon by Mr. Morrison from Protective Services, that with licensing and other elements of the economy opening up, we may see a kind of surge, I would perhaps describe it as, for people to return to those environments, and an increased demand in relation to potentially alcohol fueled and other linked behaviours. But we'll keep a very close watching brief on that, and as is touched upon by Mr. Morrison in his updates, we've been working incredibly closely with our colleagues in the local authority, and again, I think it's fair to say that our level of engagement and the level of joint working, probably due to the pandemic, we've always had a strong relationship in Aberdeen City, has been enhanced, and those plans that we're both, all agencies are working towards are very well thought out, and lots of input from the relevant agencies. So I think we're as equipped and as ready as we possibly can. As has been touched upon by, again, Mr. Morrison from Protective Services, we've got joint working planned for weekends for the foreseeable future, where some of staff are coming out and we're doing joint inspections and joint patrols of licensed premises. Again, that's really good practice, and it demonstrates the spirit of partnership that we're operating within, and we're certainly not working in isolation or in silos, so members should take some degree of confidence from that. And again, I think the challenge for us all is that as we slowly but surely emerge from the pandemic and the elements of the lockdown, that we are able to focus on developing risks and threats and harms, and make sure that anything that is new and is a new focus, that we're actually putting appropriate resources to that and support each other as best we possibly can. It may be that certain elements that we previously dealt with it may be a bit more sluggish in appearing, or may not reappear, so we just have to align our resources and our focus accordingly. So hopefully that's been helpful to members, and I'll move on to the thematic report, if that's in order, Convener.
Yes, thank you. And I should have said that I knew you would be giving us an update on that, but thank you for that. I don't see any hands on questions from members, but thank you for putting it in context and reassurance, and also that you are working with Mr. Morrison and his team. So that's reassuring to know. So thank you. So yes, moving straight on to the report.
Okay. Thank you, Convener. Members, you have a very detailed thematic report, complaints about the police, which was previously requested by members. I don't seek to rehearse the report line by line. I'm pretty confident that you'll all have had the opportunity to peruse it, to absorb the contents, and you may have some questions. Suffice to say, and the convener gave some context regarding this, but confidence in policing across Scotland throughout the pandemic is probably at its highest levels that have been recorded, or engagement with the public to ensure that we've got a good understanding of public confidence locally and nationally. Again, it's probably never been stronger in terms of that level of engagement. However, in relation to the complaints element, again, it's detailed in the report, but officers within Aberdeen City are dealing with over 70,000 incidents per year. And on average, we receive 276 complaints per year. That's a 5-year average. Respecting that we don't always get every element that we deal with right, and there's often elements that we can reflect, learn and improve upon our performance, our interaction, our communication with members of the public and complainers, and also to ensure that expectations are appropriate or realistic. I would suggest that in the vast majority of occasions, as detailed by those figures, we actually do provide an excellent service, and the interactions that we have with the public are very positive. But as I touched upon, there is no complacency from me or from my staff, and there's always opportunities for us to improve or enhance our service. With COVID context, again, I just touched upon that, but members will have seen within the report that there is 40 complaints throughout that 12-month period, and this report was prepared at the end of February, so it wasn't quite the full calendar year. And again, as I've highlighted to members, at times during the pandemic, we were one of the few, I suppose, public-facing organisations, and perhaps did find it a brunt of frustrations were very much focused on us because we had face-to-face interaction, and it was challenging, I think, for the public in relation to the legislation, the guidance, and confusing at times, as I've said to the committee previously. And I think often we found ourselves to be the brunt of that in relation to people's frustrations. So again, if you contextualise that in terms of all our interactions in relation to COVID and the pandemic, and there was 40 complaints about our interactions, I still think that's a reasonable performance, respecting there's always areas we can improve. So happy to take questions, convener, and hopefully that's provided a broad context in relation to the report. Thank you.
I think that's been very helpful. Thank you for that. And I didn't want to say always room for improvement, far be it from me. So I'm glad you said the words, but I think it's a pretty good rate, and you have been in the firing line for it for the whole time. So, and that's not easy, just even on a human level. So I think it's a very good report, and I think the figures are actually very good to reflect the period of time we are living in. Councillor Townsend, I see you'd like to ask a question.
Thank you very much, convener. Just to make the comment, I'm sure we'll all agree that the 4E strategy, this engage, educate, encourage and enforce, it's working well with the Police Scotland, but it seems to be permeating across some of your partners as well. I've seen it mentioned in other reports, so it's very effective terminology, and I think it'll help people as we move on. It's been good to come out of the pandemic with that, at least. My question is at 3.326, the recent review led by Right Honourable Dame Ailish Angelini QC. She made a number of recommendations for improving inquiries into complaints, and 36 were direct to Police Scotland. One of the key recommendations that she made was that all complaints about police are now to be retained and investigated by the Professional Standards Department, who will receive additional mediation and unconscious bias training. I wonder if, Chief Superintendent, you could comment on that in any length, and also could you tell us if the recommendations have been implemented or are about to be? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. So I'll take it in reverse order, if I may. The recommendations have either been put in place or will be put in place in the coming months. Relative to the recommendation about Professional Standards Department taking on all complaints. That will be in place next week, the 3rd of May. They are receiving training, the additional uplift to professional standards. That's taking place this week, and training as described by yourself. So as of May, early May, they will take on all fresh complaints that will come in. There's a transitional period where divisionally we are still sitting with some complaints that have come in the intervening period. So it will probably take 2 to 3 months, I would suggest, until PSD, Professional Standards Department, apologies for my use of acronyms, will have whole ownership of all complaints coming in. As you touched upon, Councillor Townsend, a number of recommendations linked to policing. One of them actually significantly about the increased use of body-worn cameras across Scotland, and the forces investing significantly in investment and rollout of that. However, members will be aware that North East have had body-worn cameras for some 10 years now, and we've had an enhanced uplift of that. Last year we had secured some additional funding, so officers in this area, in terms of that recommendation, are very well placed because we are using that equipment already. Always areas and always times where we can enhance our use of it and make sure that's activated at the right time. But we are in a fairly decent position in relation to that. So yes, divisionally, the responsibility will pass to Professional Standards Department as of early May, Councillor Townsend, and as it stands, we won't have a service delivery unit dealing with complaints locally. Does that answer your question?
That's perfect, Chief Superintendent. Thank you for that, and thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, I've got Councillor Allard, I think. Yes.
Yes, thank you very much, Convener, and thanks very much for this report, Chief Superintendent MacDonald. It was very interesting. Particularly, I have to say about the return to normal behavior. So my first question of two will be about that return to normal behavior. We've seen, and I've been frustrated over the years, I've been one of them, being a football fan, of the reaction of the football fans and the level of policing that you and your officers have to put for every football event. And we've seen during COVID that some of the problem, and we've seen that the previous report happen on when the football games, matches were on television in some premises. So I just want to have some reassurance that we're not going to back to normal behavior. Have we done some action to try to address that problem we had before COVID and some problem that were more pronounced during COVID that we will not repeat? So have we done any kind of work with local supporters group and with a football club and with the SFA just to make sure that the level of policing should be less and that the threshold of what is a normal conduct for a football fan, whatever it is, watching it in a premises on television or going to a football stadium, should be very much a lot higher than it is just now. That will be my first question.
Okay, Chief Super.
Okay, thanks, Convener. Thanks, Councillor Allard. So obviously, the football dynamic has been significantly changed during the pandemic. All fixtures have been supporter free. I would suggest that again the North East have been very much ahead of the game in relation to our approach to football fixtures going into Police Scotland some almost 9 years ago now. We were one of the first areas in the country to adopt police-free fixtures. So, you know, if we felt that the risk was minimal and there was no intelligence, for example, in relation to potential disorder, we were comfortable that that was a matter for the club in relation to the supervising and the stewarding of it. And, you know, the changes in relation to how we've policed sporting events have been quite radical, I would suggest, over the last 10 years. We will only focus on events or fixtures where we believe there is a potential risk in relation to disorder. You touched upon the engagement with fans groups and others. Yes, we continuously link in with them and discuss any of our kind of plans and proposals. I have to say that there has been very little engagement, being very honest with you, during lockdown. That will be something that we will reinstigate. It's difficult to predict in terms of when we will see fans coming back more wholesale in relation to football fixtures and indeed other events. But I think a reasonable anticipation would be potentially autumn or later 2021, perhaps early 2022. It's very difficult to predict. But we'll adopt the same approach that we've had in relation to risk assessing the particular events, Councillor Allard, allocating a resource that we believe is proportionate to that event. Obviously, as you know, resources have to come from somewhere for these types of events, and often it's through cancellation of people's rest days, or alternatively moving people from community policing to the event. So it's decisions we don't take lightly. We understand the impact it can have on our communities to have a slightly more limited police cover during a sporting event. So yes, you have my assurance that we'll continue with that positive, pragmatic engagement going into the new football season, and we'll have to shape our response accordingly as that develops. I think it'd be really difficult for any of us to really anticipate what that might look like.
Thank you very much for that answer, and it's very reassuring. And particularly, we don't want to go back to normal behavior. I think the good work what was done, and I remember congratulating Aberdeen for the good work has been done in the past. We need to redouble our effort, and any help we can give as elected members to make sure that we don't need to have so many officers at every event, and change the attitude of football fan would be fantastic. My second question is on what Councillor Townsend said already on the unconscious bias training. I would have to declare an interest in their convener. I'm on the board of the Grampian Regional Equality Council, which provides some of us training. I just want to be clear on the wording unconscious bias training, which is very much in debate just now. Can we go? I know it's a difficult question. It's a question for us all, but particularly maybe for Police Scotland. Unconscious bias training, once the training has been done, anybody going through that training have to understand that unconscious bias cannot be an excuse anymore. It will become only bias and could end up as a criminal offense. So, as fast as we can go through everybody involved on this kind of training, people have to understand that not only training is important, but once the training is being done, you won't have a second chance to have more training out of it. You should be adapted to react to every situation. I just wanted some reassurances that was well understood.
Yeah, I would concur with that, Councillor Allard. And whilst it's perhaps it's termed as training, I think it's enhanced awareness. I think we're very well aware in terms of our understanding and our approach to groups and those who perhaps have protective characteristics. And I think it's just really to emphasise the fact that we are looking to make sure that those that are carrying out this very important job of assessing and analysing complaints about our service delivery actually have a very enhanced awareness of how they position themselves and the perceptions of others about the police and how we conduct ourselves.
Thank you very much for that answer. Very reassuring. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I see Mr. Morrison has raised his hands. That's not historical? Would you like to come in, Mr. Morrison?
It was just to add a useful observation as well. We and colleagues across Scotland are working with the SFA in relation to COVID controls in relation to football and the resumption. So there is that stream of work going on ahead as well, which should help ensure that crowds can return safely to football matches in the future.
Thank you for that. I think people very much want to get back to normal as soon as they can in larger groups, but we just have to take our time and so that we can always be safe and that life can be normal eventually. Okay, thank you very much. Can I get you all to or ask the members just to agree that and endorse the report as in the recommendation?
Convener, can I highlight that Councillor Gregg actually has his hand raised?
Oh, I sorry, I didn't see anybody else at all. So, Councillor Gregg?
Yes, thank you, Convener. Thank you, Mr. MacDonald, for the report. I think that noting the quite considerable increase in the number of on-duty allegations and the quality of service complaints, I'm pretty certain that that's a blip due to the unusual circumstances that we're in, and that the public will have different expectations once this crisis is over. So many thanks to the officers, for all the teams, for being so well prepared, and for the excellent service, for being so sensitive and for adapting so well to the difficult circumstances. But I had a question about the Angelini recommendations. One of them is to make the complaints process more accessible. The aim is to empower people and to reach out to people. And I mean, that's a worthy aim. And I wondered if we could have a little detail on how the division is actioning that, because well, for me, there's the concern that you want to empower genuine concerns, but at the same time, there will also be perhaps vexatious and unwelcome complaints as well. So how do you strike that balance in the division?
Are you able to answer that, Chief Superintendent?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Gregg. So first of all, in terms of the ability to make the, I suppose, complaints process more accessible, certainly through my experience in policing, it's more convenient and easier now to articulate any concerns about poor service in relation to policing than it's ever been, either electronically, and that's really come to the focus during the pandemic, through telephone, or directly with police officers that you're encountering with on the street. And again, staff are aware, Councillor Gregg, that if someone is unhappy or is perceived to be unhappy with the interaction, that they will, highlight the opportunities in relation to how they can express that or challenge things. They will highlight that to line managers, and we generally try to make sure that the dots are joined in relation to anticipating any issues or concerns from any individual. In terms of your point about the variety, I suppose, of complainers that we do have, thankfully, the vast majority of those that complain tend to do that on a singular occasion, and we have dialogue and interaction, and will reflect, accept and acknowledge and identify learning on every occasion that we possibly can. There is a small percentage of complainers that, as you say, are vexatious, that there is no substance to their complaints, generally speaking, and they often have pursued that type of conduct for lengthy periods of time. And we have clearly defined policies in place to understand and respond to their complaints. We don't ignore them. We still have to assess. So someone may have been classed as vexatious for behaviour, but may have a legitimate concern in relation to some interaction that they've had. So we don't, disregard their complaints or their feedback. So it is quite difficult, it is quite complex. I believe that the mechanisms for highlighting areas of concern have never been easier or greater. And indeed, one might argue that some of those approaches could be replicated elsewhere across the public sector. I certainly think there's a significant spotlight on the police in relation to this, and the ability and our interaction in relation to responding to concerns is perhaps not replicated right across the public sector, but others will have an opinion about that also.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, I don't think there's any other questions, and that was a very full answer. And I actually agree with you, Chief Superintendent. There are just some people that are just Not nice, and we'll complain for anything in any sector. Anyway, thank you very much for that full report and for the introduction about COVID. So members, can I just ask you please to agree the recommendations? So it's committee discussed, we have comment on and endorse the report.
Great.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You're very welcome to stay, but I know you're a busy person, so please, if you want to leave, then by all means do so. But thank you very much, and I look forward to catching up with you in advance of the next committee. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. Thank you, members, and I will catch up with you later. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Right, moving on to agenda item 12, is Scottish Fire Rescue Service Annual Performance Report. Hello, Mr. Parkinson. Welcome. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, convener. Thanks for asking. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. And thank you for making the time to meet with me in between the last committee. I appreciate that. Thank you. So we have the report, and for me, it looks quite good. Also, you're going to, I'm sure, highlight certain things. Always helpful to have the introduction section that you have and see that there is a decrease on accidental dwelling fires. And I have to say, it still kind of amazes me that many of the fires caused by cooking, or over 50% are caused by cooking. But perhaps you can talk us a little bit through the report.
Absolutely, thank you very much, convener. So as you say, you have the report in front of you. It's not my intention to go through it in any detail, but I will draw your attention to some key points. So although this is our 6th monthly reporting period, this actually constitutes our year-end figures for all of 2021. And it measures how we've performed against the priorities that we've set out in our Scottish Fire and Rescue Service local fire and rescue plan for Aberdeen City. That's aligned to our organisation's national priorities and also to the Aberdeen City Council local outcome improvement plan. It brings the two documents together and describes how we will deliver services in Aberdeen City. So I'm pleased to say that despite the challenging year that we've had in relation to COVID and all the complications it's presented to all sectors, our performance towards all 6 of our priorities has been positive. I will draw your attention to the following points. The accidental dwelling fires section, which highlights that we've had a reduction of 15% from last year and below the 4-year average performance, which is very welcome. And as you highlight, 51% of accidental dwelling fires are as a result of cooking. And although it's not captured in the figures, you can add alcohol to that as well, cooking whilst under the influence of alcohol. These figures represent the focus and a strong focus that we have and continue to maintain on community safety. This has had to be adapted considerably during the pandemic to remain effective and to continue to deliver against the good priorities, against our priorities. But as you can see, we've managed to do that quite well and have some positive outcomes there. There's a linkage between the accidental dwelling fires and the number of casualties and fatalities that we see from those events. So older people, those people with disabilities, those who live alone, those who have alcohol and drug dependencies continue to be the most at risk from fire, and therefore we seek to focus our prevention activity. Partnership working is fundamental and critical to the success of that, and we're working closely with partner agencies on single shared assessments and in signposting vulnerable people as and when we find them to the most appropriate agency to provide the support they need. We're doing a lot of work to encourage our partner agencies who are already working with those who are vulnerable to highlight them to us so that we can provide any and all support we can to them in their home to make them as safe as they possibly can be. In the last year, we've had 28 people who unfortunately have been physically affected by fire through injury, and 3 of those have tragically turned into fatalities. I'll also draw your attention to the all deliberate fires section of the report. We've had 335 deliberate fires across the city, which is a decrease on last year's figures and on the 4-year average. And if you remember, we've talked about deliberate fires in the past, particularly in relation to those that were experienced in Concorth and at the Gramps. I just want to highlight there's a difference between antisocial deliberate fires and those fires that might be lit for the purposes of burning garden waste. They are all captured under deliberate fires figures, but some clearly have a malicious or antisocial aspect, whereas some are perfectly legitimate and are done for the best of intentions. And Convener, the final thing I'll draw your attention to is our unwanted fire alarm signals, or UFAS section. 60% of all the incidents that we turn out to are false alarms, which is a huge number. 34% of those are what we would class as an unwanted fire alarm signal. And these are the instances that are caused either by human behaviour or automatic system faults. We have seen a drop in the last year. However, as we have been through a pandemic, and the instance of people being in the workplace has been significantly reduced, and as human behaviour is a key part in unwanted fire alarm signals, we are making a linkage at this stage between the drop in the UFAS figures and the correlation in the drop of people in the workplace. UFAS, however, is a key priority for the fire service, and we've got a project at a national level underway to produce a strategy for us to reduce the unwanted fire alarm signals and incidents that we attend, and more information will be forthcoming to the committee as and when that's available. Convener, I will pause there and welcome any questions that either yourself or members might have.
Yes, thank you for that, Mr. Farquharson. I'm just actually pick up on the last point you highlighted, because I seem to recall there was a question from I think it was Councillor Mason actually, that asked, you know, did you want to be made aware of any fires that there might be people were intending, so that you weren't unnecessarily called out? And it was reassuring to get that answer at that time. It's good to see figures going down, but obviously there have been fatalities as well, which is a worry. One is just always one too many. Absolutely. I have Councillor Allard. Councillor Allard, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, thank you very much, Convener. It's just to have a precision, because on page 53(9) of the report, we talk again about the community bins being on fire in Tory, and we know that we know exactly what happened, and we know that it's not happening anymore. But I just wonder to what extent people out there think it's still not happening, because the evidence is still there. It's not like other fires at home, or fires, you know, accidental fires, you know, the vegetation grows with it at home, nobody can see it. There, the evidence is still out there on the bins, because even if the leaders have been changed, and they've not all been changed, sometimes they'll be deformed the fire, the traces of fire is still there physically on the bin. Have we made any effort to try either to repaint them or to change the bins, just to make sure that the people, the residents, don't think that is still happening as it was happening early on?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer your question. We have no locus at all in how the cleansing department would go about their business. We simply will attend, deal with the situation, make it safe, and hand over to the relevant agencies. I completely understand what you're saying, that perception is key, and if people perceive that there is an issue because they are presented with the visual aftermath of a fire, then their perception will be that there's perhaps a higher problem than there is. But I'm sorry, Councillor, I don't think I can add any more to that, because it's not an area I have any locus in.
I'll just come in there, thank you. I think that's something that we can take up with maybe Derek to get an answer post the committee today, from one of the other services might be able to get that answer for you, if that's acceptable.
That would be great, Convener, particularly if the area commander Bruce Farquharson will accept that it would be helpful for it to happen.
Absolutely. I not only do I accept it's helpful, it's desirable. We remove all traces of a fire so that people feel safe in the environment they live in. So I absolutely accept and support that, Councillor.
Thank you very much. I saw Councillor Townsend.
Thank you again, Convener. It's not so much a question, it's just to hopefully make a very positive comment that within the report mentioned home fire safety visits, get in touch, easy to arrange, and it goes on to quote a national phone number, a 0800 number, or call your local fire station, or text or complete online. So I think that's very positive that people who find difficulty with technology or whatever, everything's there, allowing somebody to get in touch, which is very important. Thank you.
That's helpful.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor. Thank you.
Is there any other questions? I'm not seeing any on my screen, other than Councillor Townsend. I think your hand's still up, but I'm not. But if there's no other questions, then can we just endorse the report, please? No.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. That's been helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Parkinson. We'll look forward to catching up again with you. Now, wait a minute. Sorry, I'm in full stream and I see Derek's put his hand up. So if you just bear with me. Derek.
No, apologies, convener. It was just when you were convenient. It was just to confirm that Mr. McGowan will indeed follow up that comments from Councillor Allard and Mr. Farquharson's suggestions around bin attendances and what have you, and we will prepare an update at a later date.
Okay, well, can I just ask then, in the light of you saying that that's just shared with the whole Public Protection Committee then, please, so everyone knows? I'm going to take that. Thank you. So apologies for that, Mr. Parkinson, but thank you again, and I look forward to catching up with you. And when we meet again at committee, it'll be in June, so let's hope we're a lot further forward. But thank you. I meant in the bigger context of things, but here, and look forward to seeing you again.
Many thanks, convener. Thank you, councillors.
Take care. Bye now. Okay, thanks very much, members, for that. We're moving on to item 13, corporate parenting updated plan for 2021 to 2023. This is also the 5th annual report that we have. Obviously, a lot of very important information here. Do you know, when I was going through it, it really struck me, and I say this as a mother, I suppose, and as a person. It's, you know, on page 52 in the report, said, you know, a young person said, "I'm scared I'm going to die alone," on the impact of lockdown and care experienced by young people in Aberdeen. I think we really have to take on board just how young people are actually feeling right now. I know there's lots of good work that's happening, but it struck a chord with me, and I felt it's important to raise that at the beginning, that we need to sort of feel their pain. There's lots of positive things there as well, and I know there's lots of good work that is going on, but we do have a responsibility as a corporate parent. Good to see you there, Mr. Simpson. I'm just going to hand straight over to you.
Good morning, convener. I'm joined this morning by Andrew McGill, who's also been very instrumental in compiling the report this morning and driving this forward. But just as a means of introductions, convener, you know, I think, as you mentioned, this is the 5th annual report of the corporate parenting plan, and it draws together the work on a multi-agency basis and of the activity to improve the outcomes for our looked after children. The report has been prepared collaboratively with the input from young people themselves, and you have obviously just referenced an example of where their input is very much apparent within the report. The corporate parenting activity over the last year has taken full account of the Independent Care Review report, The Promise, which was published in February 2020, which sets out the need for services to collaborate and think transformatively as to how services are designed and delivered. This work will be delivered over the next decade, and the first national plan on implementing the promise was published at the end of March 2021, and that sets out the priorities for the next 3 years. Previous reporting to the committee has referenced the impact of COVID on our care experienced young people, and more broadly on families. Despite COVID, the report highlights continuing active engagement with young people and work to positively address the structural inequalities that they experience. That said, there is always more to be done, and I'm happy, along with my colleague Ms McGill, to answer any questions that members may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simpson. And yes, I should have mentioned Andrea McGill, so I'm sure she's there somewhere. Members, do you have questions? Right, I can see. Hello, Andrea. So I've got Councillor Duncan and Councillor Dunbar. So we'll start with Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Mr. Simpson and Ms McGill, for the report. It's good to see that such progress has been made on corporate parenting. I'm aware of two issues that have recurred throughout the 5 years. One is raising awareness of the obligations of everybody within the council as a corporate parent. So I wondered how the training was going to be picked up again after the pandemic for elected members and officers to reinforce the duties that we all have as corporate parents in Aberdeen City Council. And the second thing that repeats itself in the report and the appendix is young persons' fear that they're being seen but not heard still. And I noted the amazing uptake and success on the Momo app, which is remarkable. But what else is being done to make sure that young people feel that they're being heard as well?
You're on mute, Mr. Simpson.
That's probably not a bad idea, me being on mute. But I'll let my colleague, Ms McGill, come in first in relation to those questions.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Convener. Good morning, Councillor Duncan. In relation to your first point, Councillor, just in terms of the training, there's been a digital a digital connection has been made to training, and I'm aware that the head of service, Mr. Simpson, is considering with those of us who've been involved in the design just the best way that we can target training to continue to raise awareness. What we've found is that there are cultural issues across different sectors of the local authority and partners, as well as elected members, just in terms of understanding about the extent of our corporate parenting responsibilities and duties. So it's very much a work in progress, and we don't see the availability of the digital training as in itself sufficient. So over the last 12 months, there's been webinars that have been produced. We've looked at targeted ways of raising awareness, but that's going to be a long-term plan in relation to that aspect. That was a really nice and interesting question that you've raised about being seen, not heard, or heard but not seen. So the Momo app has been really successful, but it's in itself, again, it's not enough. So we've got over nearly 200 young people who've got access to the app, with nearly 400 of our workforce have got similar access. But we need to look at the different platforms that young people can give their views and the different ways that we can give voice to their lived experience, because giving views is different from us understanding the impact on their life experiences and how that's going to impact in their future. So it's two things that I hope that we've highlighted in relation to that being a focus over the next 2 years in the corporate parenting plan, and how we're going to take that forward as champions as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Is that adequate for you, Councillor Duncan?
Yes, and I look forward to hearing next year about progress on both of those things. I'm very satisfied that they're pretty high up the agenda and action will be taken. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I agree with you about training and so on, because I know I've gone through various training sessions over my period as a councillor, and I think it's something you have to continue to do, and to listen to what young people are saying. We're all getting older on this committee, so we need to sort of really engage. I'm excluding you, Andrea, from that. We're talking about the councillors. So we're all getting older, although I think once a mother, you're always a mother. And I think it's good to hear what young people are actually saying and experience it for them. So I have a few other hands. Councillor Leslie Dunbar.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, Andrea. My question, I suppose, kind of follows on a little bit from Councillor Duncan's about looked after young people potentially being seen and not heard. So I wondered if you could maybe tell us a little bit more about, within this 2-year period, around how we're going to look at widening and deepening the participation, in particular of looked after young people with kinship care experience, and also maybe children as well, because often it's, teens or late teens that we've been very successful, I think, with engaging with, but there may be other challenges ahead. And clearly, you know, it is with a view to help shape services about the importance of lived experience and, you know, the impact of, you know, their life, you know, the impact of the services on their lives. So thank you.
With the move away from some of the restrictions around about the Life Changes Trust money, we've now commissioned our third sector providers on a different basis, and that's with an aim to widen the reach of our approach towards participation of looked after young people, which should go beyond the Champions Board. We don't have the detail round about that because at the moment we don't have sufficient resource to make that happen. We've had a number of scoping discussions about what we can achieve, what the priority groups would be within that, and kinship care and engagement with younger children, particularly those who are placed out with Aberdeen City, as a priority group. So we're looking at various means, digital connection that goes beyond the use of apps, about remaining in touch and keeping in contact with young people, as well as looking at more traditional ways of engagement through different forms of relational and direct group work approaches. But we don't have the concrete detail of the plan pinned down yet. We know what we're not doing effectively enough just now. We know where we would like to go, but it's getting the resource round about that. So I'm pleased to report that we've managed to replace the role of Participation and Development Officer, and I'm also pleased to report that our own Children's Rights Service is looking at shifting its focus to be more geared up towards direct participatory opportunities with young people. And I'm also really hopeful that the additional resource that we've got through the Promise Implementation Fund will allow us to extend and build the capacities of those that have lived experience, because we're looking at engaging with them in a much more direct way over the next 12-month period. That will include young people and their families, to ask them directly about what's been helpful about their experiences, been involved with social work services in particular, and what some of the barriers were in relation to that. So that's just a brief kind of outline, I suppose, in terms of where the vision for this and where we see things progressing and developing. But it's a huge agenda, and it can't be seen just as a discrete activity. It needs to cut across all our activities in terms of involvement with children and families in our service area.
Right. Thank you for your very detailed reply. And also, I think that, you know, you're providing, you know, some assurance, but I think you're also being very direct in saying where, you know, there may be some gap that we do obviously need to look at, and how, given that it is also a multi-agency approach, that there may potentially be resource across the agencies that we may need to engage. So thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Councillor. Thanks.
Thank you. I have two other hands up. So Councillor Gregg.
Yeah, thank you, convener. I'm on a similar theme. I agree that corporate parenting is a very important responsibility that we have, one of our most important, and therefore the provision of resources whenever possible need to be provided to help and support the young people in our care. So with that in mind, there's mention later in the report of the continuation of the funding, which was originally provided for through the Life Changes Trust funding. I think it's really positive that funding is going to continue through funding the development officer post. But just to check, will the activities, the coordinating, the identifying of needs that's done through that post, will that be seamless? Will there be continuity as we move forward and we're looking ahead to 2024? Clearly there are going to be fresh, difficult issues to tackle in order to help young people, especially the isolation issue. So it's positive that the resources are being provided. Just to check that that there's a clear strategy that's going to be continuous.
Yes, I think our planning around about the strategy is looking for continuity and some certainty around various issues associated with resources. So I was delighted to be informed that we were successful in our application to the Common Good Fund, which will give us an additional element of funding in order to extend the planning period. But we do have a contract in place with Who Cares Scotland that will go up until at least 2024 and may allow for an extension. And we're also seeking to look at how our own support services are aligned to ensure that we're not reliant on an individual service area to be responsible for leadership activities round about this area. So it's very much a collective and a collaborative response.
Thank you for that. I think that the Champions Board has got a very important role to play as well. That's been really helpful in providing leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Yes, I know that Councillor Leslie Dunbar speaks very highly about the Champions Board, so thank you for that. Councillor Allard, I'm just trying to see whose hands are all up. I think you're the last.
Thank you very much, Governor. Yeah, I just add my thanks to all the officers for the fantastic work who's been done during COVID. And I have to say that, you know, as a corporate parenting, our responsibility at corporate parenting, it's awful to see that even with the best effort and all the plans put forward, that with COVID happening, we see that, you know, so our young people into care are on the first line, and it's the one who will be suffering the most. I've seen on page 90, 32 of the report, the sharp increase of our young people in care ended up in custody. Really is horrific, is an horrific figure, and the excuse of COVID shouldn't be an excuse, because, you know, we should be able, we should engage, having our responsibility ourselves as elected member as well, Convener, making sure that these things don't happen, and in that way, that the gap is not getting worse between, you know, children into care and children who are not. On that particular point, I know that you talked already about the good work and the plan has been done, but are we starting to amend the plan to respond better to an event like COVID-19, and how to make sure that we make sure that when something like this happens, we have our young people into care right as a priority, but more a priority, and having a plan ready to be delivered with the experience that we now have. So I just want to have this reassurance. And the last thing I will want to point out is on page 117, 59 of the report. We hear a development officer who's been affected by the virus. I just wanted to have reassurance and put my thanks, and the thanks is the Governor, the committee for all the hard work and making sure that our thanks for our concern for the health of all our officers who are the front line. And I know it's been through windows and etc. and it's not been as easy as possible, very much as a front line. And you know, our thanks to the families as well, knowing that there's member of the family were very much put at risk, and that way, and it's easy to minimize the risk, but the risk is still there, and that would have been one of the profile. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Allard. I hope that I can give you some confidence and reassurance in terms of our preparedness. I mean, I think after the first lockdown restrictions, we saw very, very quickly the impact on young people who had left the care system, in particular, the impact on them of a lack of connection and a lack of access to supportive relationships. And as a local authority, I think we've responded to that in a number of different levels. We looked really quickly at how we could digitally support and resource young people, and we have put additional money and funding into that because what we saw was that young people were overly reliant on one device. They had a smartphone, but they had very limited data, or they didn't have reliable Wi-Fi. So we have made a bid to digital to connect them Scotland, and you'll see that we've had over 100 devices that we've distributed to care leavers as opposed to those that are currently in care. But very quickly after the first restrictions, we get access to the Lord Provost Fund, and we could look at supporting those young people who had particular issues to do with digital connection. We also made significant amounts of welfare resources available again to the care leaving group of young people who were most isolated, and we delivered a significant amount of food, and we prepared home cooked meals for young people. So I think our responses were well informed, that were delivered sensitively, and it has improved many examples of relationships with those that have left the care system. We've also improved our own use of social media, and our use of Facebook in the care leaver service has increased by about 400%. So I'll also pass on what you'd said about our colleague who became unwell through COVID. He's now back in Australia, and he's not fully recovered yet, I'm sad to say. So thanks for that, Councillor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Allard. And I'm not sure at this point what, but I would like to do something on behalf of the committee, given that Peter has been highlighted in the report, so it's not a data protection thing. If I would just have to say, I'll call on the help of maybe Derek and Mr. Bell, and also the Lord Provost, and in my own capacity as deputy. I would like it to be minuted that we're going to try and do something in recognition of that. I can't say what it is, but I'm saying it, so it's being recorded, and we will do something and somehow. So thank you for that. Strikes a chord. My son's Peter, so the name jumps out as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Allard, did you want to say something else? Because you've come back on. No.
I just want to add my thanks to Concovent. I think it will be a nice gesture to have just to make sure. It's not very often that we have a person highlighted that way in the report, so it will be a great if you could do that. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, can I just please ask you, if there's no more questions, can we agree and endorse the recommendations as they are laid out?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Andrea, and thank you, Mr. Simpson. So we are going on to agenda item 14, Assurance on Child Poverty Action Plan. Obviously, it's Derek McGowan that's here. I'm not saying obviously, but much of what we do is actually noting, and this report is for noting that it has already come to Operational Delivery Committee in January, and then it has been referred to the Scottish Government. That's the 1920 report. There are some very salient points, I think, of the whole report, 4.3 and 5.1. My particular concern is the number of children that are still living in poverty, which is now based at, I think, 5,500. I have asked Mr. McGowan, I don't know if he's going to be able to share it with you right now. I am in receipt of it, of a map, just to give a rough idea of where the children are located across the city, and it is, as I anticipated, across much of the regeneration area. I'm speaking like this because, as I say, we often just note things, but there is important work going on there, and we need to do all that we can within our positions to try and alleviate poverty across the city. There are many positive things, but equally the numbers might also rise because of the pandemic period, and that's not to try and undermine any of the work that has actually been done. There is a lot of good work, and in that there have been some decreases, but equally it really is actually staggering. There's so many kids in poverty. 2021, beggars belief. I often wonder what my grandmother would say. Anyway, Mr. McGowan.
Thank you, convener. Yes, as you've stated, this is a report, just the terms of reference against assurance for the committee. So as you've already spoken about, this has already been through the Operational Delivery Committee earlier this year and submitted as required to the Scottish Government. This is a joint report between the City Council and the local NHS board as required by the legislation. The plan is there, the report is there. I think an important aspect of this is, you've highlighted 5.1, convener, that this report relates to the previous financial year, so there is no information in there regarding the response to COVID. That would be part of this year's report that will come before you later in this year and before the Operational Delivery Committee. Yes, the 5.2 highlights that the data suggests that 21.5% of children in Aberdeen are living in poverty. As defined, this is a decreasing target, but a decreasing rate rather, from the 22.8% in 16-17. It does demonstrate that there is some progress being made, but yes, the rate remains at 21.5%. I'll pause there. I understand there are specific issues you would like to discuss, convener, and hopefully I can answer any questions you have as well. And the link that you mentioned there, I've shared that with Mr. Jameson. If he can perhaps display it on screen, if that's suitable.
Thank you, Mr. McGowan. If it is possible to share the link. If it doesn't happen, members, just now, it was something that I had asked about how the number of children experiencing poverty and how they are actually placed across the city, and some of the regeneration areas, then a significant number of children would fall into those areas. I'm just going to invite questions actually from members. I can see Councillor Allard, then Councillor Dunbar.
Just for your information, convener, I have managed to share that link. Members should be able to see that just now, and I will share it to the membership after the meeting.
Okay, and actually then, Derek, can I just sorry, Councillor Allard, but Mr. Jameson, can you actually see that somehow can that be reflected in the report or in the minute, so that it's recorded somehow that it's there?
We'll capture the information in the minute in some form.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry about that, Councillor Allard. It's just that as that information came to hand. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, thanks very much, Convener. I would have two questions which I'll put on one, and you're absolutely right, in light of the map, and you can see that our most deprived areas were most challenging during COVID, and some of them I do represent in this council. I see on 5.1 it says it's anticipated that the number of children in Aberdeen living in poverty will rise due to the effect of the pandemic, and it's a bit what I said earlier on at this meeting. Is we are responsible for children being in poverty in Aberdeen. The excuse of the pandemic cannot be an excuse if is the one who are affected the most. So the answer cannot be the pandemic, and the answer is found largely on page 13612 of the report. Sharp in Scotland is mainly due to causes or drivers partially or wholly outside a parent's controls, and usually completely outside children's control. So this includes aspects of social security, income from employment, and cost of living. So it's a very important part of the report, because it really demystifies what the general population will try to point out, but somehow, children and particularly parents' responsibility. And I really want to point out on this and see how we can, not only during COVID, but generally speaking, when we talk about poverty of children, highlight and maybe, right at the front of in your report, putting that, it's not at all the responsibility of children, but it's proven that it's not. The main factor cannot be the parents' responsibility, but it's other factors and other forces. So I think it's important to have that there. And on the same time, my second question will be around these challenging areas. I'm growing more and more concerned. I would like to have comments about officers about this. Is that universality of helping children, whatever it's, Scottish level or Aberdeen City Council level, and having all this help given to every all across Aberdeen, as opposed to targeting. Once we target one of this challenging community, and then we extend whatever programs to help children in that area to all Aberdeen, we lose that difference. So we don't have an extra help for the children in poverty, but we give that extra help to every children, which means that we don't have anymore that extra help that we should have. So I'm a bit conscious of that. Before we think about extending that very help that we give to children in poverty to other children, can we think twice and making sure that we increase the level of help to children with poverty all the time, as opposed to extending it to other children as well. So am I right or am I wrong to be, do I need reassurances on this will be the question.
Thank you, Councillor Allard. Mr McGowan, are you able to extrapolate the two questions there?
Yes, thank you through yourself, convener. I think Councillor Allard's first point is right. This, these issues haven't been caused by the pandemic. There are societal factors that we understand can lead to poverty, and they are diffuse in many. So there is unemployment, there is income, there's education, there's generational impacts as well. So yes, the pandemic hasn't caused this, but we understand as more and more data comes out that there is it has exacerbated the issue in some communities and in some households due to employment opportunities, due to furlough, due to businesses closing. So these are all factors that are in there. So absolutely, the report for the previous financial year, when it comes forward later this year, will detail the impact of COVID over the year, but also the steps we've taken as a council, as a health board, to mitigate them, which will include linking into your second point, Councillor Allard, the universality of the offer. I think there are a whole host of measures that are taken across the city that every, if I look at young people, children and young people, for example, every child and young people has access to. So that's school, that is, we have free school meals, we have education, we have the expansion in early years care, for example, and these are all measures designed to, over time, alleviate poverty by improving education, improving attainment, for example. So there is a whole host of measures. The report that's before you sets out a number of those measures and how we have taken them forward, and there are many, and we could probably spend hours going through them row by row, setting out what actions have been taken. But there are a range of ongoing actions that benefit every child, where we can impact the well-being of the household as well. They are taken. But there is also a need in some areas to target those resources more effectively, because we understand from the data that there is specific need in there. I don't know if Mr Jameson can display the link again. It might just show where some of those areas are. So this sets out exactly, this is a national data set, but it identifies Aberdeen City at a community planning partnership level, which communities have the poorest outcomes and the highest, and you'll see the range there. So we understand that we need to tackle poverty in these specific areas, and I think that's the right thing to do. It doesn't mean that we don't take account of all children right across the city, but we understand there's probably some extra measures we can do, and when we take them through community planning structures, through locality planning and the like, and you'll be aware that the population needs assessment is being refreshed, and that will further help us impact. And an action that is being taken through that, councillor, is to review how we look at poverty across the city, not just child poverty, but in-work poverty, and everything that's attended to it, to make sure we've got the structures and the processes correct. I'll maybe pause there. I know I've got colleagues on, and perhaps Mr Simpson would want to come in just about that universality, councillor, if there's anything else he would like to add.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr McGowan. Mr Simpson, would you want to contribute? If Mr. Simpson's struggling to get connected, I see there's other hands. We can go to Councillor Dunbar.
Thank you, convener. I suppose kind of building on some of what Councillor Allard saying, Mr. McGowan, we know that there are universal approaches being used within the city. I think GERFEX probably, you know, the core approach, if you like, that has, I think, helped to have quite an impact in terms of child poverty over a number of years. I wanted to, and I think also the other thing is, you know, the report makes it clear, I think, about how, in terms of making every opportunity count, which is, you know, the other way in which I think we use universality as an approach, you know, is saying that there is clearly still more work to be done to roll that approach out more widely and embed it as a sustainable framework. And I think that in recent years we've seen with the legislation, you know, the way in which now that the NHS also has to report, that there will be some benefits into the future, that it may be early days yet, I think, in terms of seeing some of that impact, particularly through the, you know, the use of health visitors. But I wondered if there's any early, you know, doors information on, you know, the financial inclusion teams, that new approach or recent approach, and whether, you know, that there's some evidence that that may be helping, you know, parents of very young babies and children.
Thanks to yourself, convener. Yeah, MEOC is an important way of trying to engage with people, obviously, and that's why it's highlighted in there. I probably need to come back to you, Councillor, on the information from financial inclusion. We have our own financial inclusion team as well, and we have the financial inclusion team that's been working with the NHS. So if it's okay, what I'll do is I'll just get those information. I'll share it through the convener through to the committee.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Derek, can you please help me, because I see a hand, but I don't know whose name is attributed to it.
Councillor Houghton has his hand up, convener.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Houghton.
Thank you, convener, and thanks, Mr. McGowan, for kind of the background information and for questions that you've answered via email as well. Something I didn't really see too much of in the report, and apologies if I've missed it, it's just conversations around debt and in-house debt for people that would kind of fall into some of these areas. I should say, as you know, I grew up in what would be considered a household of relative poverty, and you know, when I see things around not having enough money to pay for heating and everything, it definitely resonates with kind of the experience that I've had when I was younger. But I also know from that experience that the role debt can play, whether that's predatory debt that families kind of get you know, badgered into, as it were, or just taking on credit because they don't feel they have alternative options elsewhere. I know now we have welfare funds and crisis grants, and it's important, obviously, to ensure that as many people are aware of those as possible. But I'd appreciate any comment on that. I know, obviously, we have groups like Christians Against Poverty and Citizens Advice that do some work around that, so I'd appreciate your thoughts.
Mr. McGowan.
Thanks, through Councillor Houghton, through yourself, convener. There is some information in there on debt around, I think it's linked into Best Start grants being provided as well. I'm just trying to find it, sorry, I think perhaps page 139, sorry, I've lost the point in the report here. Yeah, page 138, I think there is mention of Best Start grants and work that's done with Department of Work and Pension, Social Security. That links into financial inclusion, and you can see that cumulatively there's millions of pounds being made available. We also have across a number of services, so as I mentioned there, the council has its own financial inclusion team, and I think it's around about £4 to £5 million a year that is that they help people gain in terms of unclaimed benefits across the city. So they're working. We also have CFINE, who have a financial inclusion team who work with clients they have to maximise income. So there's a range of measures being taken, but it might be, again, Councillor, if you're happy, I can maybe round them up and just provide some further information on them if it's not presented here as you would like it, Convener.
That would be really helpful, just to hear about the role. Yeah, I know there's, like you said, financial inclusion stuff, but people do, that's a vicious cycle, and it can really be incredibly disruptive, you know. So I'd appreciate more information on what we're doing to kind of involve ourselves in that. Thanks, Convener. Thanks again.
Thank you, Councillor Houghton. I think that's a good question to raise, and if we can get further detail on that, I think it just reiterates the whole point: no child should be living in poverty. Right, if there's no more questions, as I say, it was just noting the report. Can we note what's in front of us? That's actually all we've got to do there. Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, members, I wanted to suggest something slightly different and maybe different from other conveners, but I have a feeling that maybe one or two people are flagging, and we still have 5 reports to go and 4 particularly important reports. So how about we just take 5 minutes? So, and if you can come back literally 5 minutes, you might want to come for a break and just come back just at literally 12 o'clock. You don't have to leave, but I will be leaving. I will be switching off my camera for 5 minutes, and we'll see you back at midday. Thank you very much. Derek, are you there?
I am indeed, convener.
Okay, thank you. I maybe you can tell if we're waiting for anybody.
It would just be a case of if all the members of the committee could actually put their camera back on, just so that I can see everybody who's here, because everybody remained in the meeting.
Okay, well. Is that as complete, Derek?
I'm looking for Councillor Allard.
Yeah, he's there.
That's fine. That's everybody returned.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for that and for coming back promptly. So the report that we're now moving on to agenda item 15, and it's Adult Protection Committee Biannual Report 2018 to 2020. I think also what I'd like to do is the chair is changing, and we had a previous chair, the independent chair was Sheena Galt, who I actually can't believe that's 2 years. I'm actually staggered when I read that. I thought, really, was it 2018? And then we'd like to welcome also Adrian Watson, who started the role. I think it was the beginning of April. Yes. So I think it's good that right. I think we're having real computer issues today. My computer just fell over there, so sorry about that. So thank you for that, and welcome, and perhaps we might get to meet Adrian at some point, if that's possible. So just straight over to you, and do you want to speak to the report?
Yes,
Claire,
thank you.
Straight over to Claire, sorry.
That's okay. Thank you, convener, and good afternoon, everybody. So this is to present the biennial report, which was submitted to Scottish Government as per legislation at the end of last year. This is independent, as the convener has said. This is a report that's presented by the convener of the Adult Protection Committee. So it's an independent chair, an independent committee made up of statutory partners who have the responsibility for the oversight of adult protection. So this is a report for that activity for adult protection in Aberdeen, and obviously for the work of the committee over the past 2 years. So although it's submitted at the end kind of November of the year, it does run up to the end of March 2020. So just a small amount of that report relate to work activity that would have been within the pandemic. So the next report will obviously be much more heavy in terms of that. So as you can see, quite a lot of information in the report in terms of multi-agency work across adult protection, and there's a lot of data as well. I suppose just to kind of highlight, we did see an increase in adult protection referrals over the period. There's been a lot of work done to raise the profile of adult protection in the city. Adult protection, as we know, is very complex and very subjective, but we've done a lot of work to try and raise the profile and just make a lot of people aware of adult protection issues, how to recognise it, how to respond, and obviously where to go if you want support with that. So we've got a number of priorities that we've highlighted for the 2 years coming up, but we do know that an inspection is just kind of on its way. So we have obviously started work in the preparation for inspection. So that's just really undertaking a self-evaluation as an adult protection multidisciplinary committee, and kind of just doing that work just to see right where we are, have we any gaps in our evidence. So but a lot of good work throughout the pandemic in terms of partners working together to keep people safe. So I'm happy to take any questions. As I say, I know there's a lot of detail in that report, but if anybody had any questions.
Thank you, Claire. I know that you're absolutely right. There is a lot of detail and there's a lot of good work that has actually happened there with more referrals. And I think the report really reflects the benefits of multi-agency working, a collaborative approach, and not going into silos and everybody actually just working together for the benefit of those that need it.
Yes.
So thank you. Now I see hands up now. So Councillor Duncan, the first hand I see.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. I know that you've had a lot of recent experience with inspections, with the really good criminal justice inspection report that we had recently. I wondered if you could give us more information, firstly, on the lessons that you've learned from your recent inspection experience with criminal justice, and also with children's services, I think, a couple of years ago. And actually, will your approach to preparing for this inspection differ because it's multi-agency? So just a bit more detail on all the work that you're doing to prepare us properly for the inspection when it comes.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Councillor. In terms of, I think the answer to your question, there we learned a lot of lessons from our recent inspection, and obviously from children's, because that was a joint inspection. The justice one was a single agency, but there was a lot of lessons to be learned. I think what we found was in terms of how we started that preparation. So we always say we want our services to be inspection ready, but there's something around being able to evidence for when the inspectors come. So one of the things we did very earlier on through the self-evaluation is we really focused on how do we evidence the outcomes, and if we couldn't evidence the outcomes, we thought, right, how are we going to be able to do this? So we created an action plan of improvement, and of course throughout the self-evaluation I think we found that it was better to say we've highlighted where our gaps are and this is what we have in place to fix it. So very much the same in adult protection. I think the difference is because it's multi-agency, we have a multi-agency group. So by doing, each agency will be doing their own self-evaluation to look at their own area, and then we bring that self-evaluation together and say there's specific gaps within certain areas, but actually collectively this is where our strengths are and this is our weaknesses. So yeah, a lot of learning from there, and we will be following the same kind of way of working that we prepped for the justice one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Did you have a follow-up, Councillor Duncan?
No, just to say thank you. That was a very good answer.
Okay. Thank you. So Derek, again, I can see a hand, but I don't see a name. So I don't know who's.
Convener, Councillor Cameron.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Convener. Well, if you could just bear with me, mod.gov has just died. See if I can get it back very quickly. All I now need to do is find the right page.
Is it a question about the report?
It's about the report. Yeah, no, I found it, Convener. Thank you for being so patient. Firstly, a comment 355 on page 237, the appointment of, excuse me, an adult public protection lead. Really good news, and that person's been in post since October 2020, so that's excellent. But my excuse me, my question is in the next page. There's a 3.5.7. There's a table, and it's about case conferences and the attendance at case conferences of partners. In this particular instance, there were 15 case conferences in total, 8 of which the police were invited to, and they actually turned up to 7 of them, which was excellent. And presented a report for the 8th one. The health professionals, there were 11 there, where 8 attended, 1 provided a report, and then there were 2 apologies. My worry is the GPs. GPs were invited to 12 out of 15 of these case conferences and didn't attend any, although they did send reports, and in 3 cases there were apologies. I'm assuming the 12 is the 9 that sent reports and the 3 that apologised but didn't send anything. I'm a little bit concerned that we have such a high proportion of these case conferences where GPs are invited for presumably very good reasons, but nobody attended. Can I have an answer to that or a comment, because it is quite worrying? Thank you.
Thank you. Claire, are you able to provide an answer to that?
I could provide around the work we're doing to try and improve the kind of communication and engagement with GPs. So we do a lot of events with GPs, and again, as I say, it's about trying to raise awareness. The case conferences are more complex because when we arrange the case conferences, GPs, as you'll imagine, are very busy. They have clinics that are booked up weeks in advance, so trying to actually get them to attend, and what we've done is try to be more accommodating with the times, and of course doing them virtually has helped that attendance, but I think sometimes it is just impossible for them to attend. But by actually getting the report of the information, at least we have that for the case conference, and that aids us with making our decision, and of course we then feed back to the GP after the case conference. So this was actually picked up in the Aberdeenshire inspection, and it was, I think it's a national issue, but it's because of the way the GPs are working and their work commitments, I think is the problem, but we are obviously trying to resolve that.
No, thank you for that. I think what struck me was that in 12 of the 15 case conferences, GPs had an input, yet they didn't attend any of them. And I accept what you're saying, but it does seem that it's something we need to find a solution to. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Cameron. And you never know, maybe with the way we are working on remotely, maybe there might be opportunities for GPs to do that without having to leave the surgery. Maybe that's a way forward, a possible way forward. I would recognise the demands on them, though. Thank you for that. Is there any more questions? I don't see any hands. Derek, is there?
There's no further hands, convener.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So we're really just looking to note and endorse the information that's contained within the report. I mean, also there is a lot of detail in here, and it is reflective of the previous 2-year period. So are you happy to do that, members?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. And Claire, thank you very much. Sorry I didn't get your name out at the beginning there. My mind just went blank there. Okay. Oh, sorry. So thank you very much for that. Are you here for the next report as well? Are you? Yes, that's what I thought. Right. So thank you. So we're moving on to the inspection of justice social work services. So it's page 251. This is a weighty dome this time, and so again, this is a lot of detail in the report, and it is actually one for noting and endorsing the information that is actually contained within the report regarding the inspection, which was over a 28-week period, which is quite a long time actually. And I think I would like to say at the beginning, because obviously we don't have the public here listening until sort of later on, but it is pretty amazing the results that was achieved. Excellent, 2 very goods and 2 goods. Like, I'm so sorry about this, but my doorbell has just gone, and so I'm going to ask Councillor Dunbar, because no one else is running to the door. So Councillor Dunbar, can you just step in, please? I'm so sorry, but I'd rather be honest with you. and Councillor Dunbar can step into my shoes ably, and I'll just put my...
Hi, so we were just about to see if there was any questions or, sorry, we moved on to the next item. Sorry, Claire.
It's okay.
So you were about to just introduce the report?
Yes.
So if we have that first, then we can take questions.
Okay, thank you. So this is to highlight the inspection report for Justice Social Work that was published in February. And I think, as the convener has said, it shows the strength. This is a very positive inspection for us. This is the 5th inspection in Scotland so far of justice, and ours is by far the most positive. So quite a good feeling for the team in terms of a lot of the good work that they do for individuals. The inspection, so it's been quite a long inspection. So the inspection commenced kind of November 2019, so that was an on-the-site inspection. It was then paused at the end of February last year, just as we went into lockdown, and then they recommenced the inspection in October last year and did the remainder of the inspection remotely. So as you'll see in the report, there's 2 recommendations from this. One of them is around our action plan, our delivery plan for the service. So they'd asked obviously if we had that, if we could get that finalised and embedded. So our 3-year delivery plan for Justice Social Work is now out for consultation. And obviously we have an overall improvement plan for justice that we're working at the moment. So a lot of the justice social work, this inspection was purely on community payback orders in terms of how we run that statutory orders and then the outcomes for the people. The justice service is very busy, and obviously the focus at the moment is trying to step up that services again and get the we have a vast amount of unpaid work hours, so there is a bit of a challenge. We know we're going to see an increase in justice as courts and the Crown Office resume their services. So we are working ready just to kind of get ready, I suppose, for the intended kind of increase. But it was just, if anybody's got any questions about the inspection, I'm happy to take them.
Okay, so I thank you for that, Claire. So I've got a question from David Cameron. Councillor Cameron first, please, then Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Councillor Dunbar. It's an excellent report. It's, you know, your team must be very happy with it. You're obviously doing all the right things. My question is in relation to a statement in page 254. You've submitted the action plan to the IJB for approval. I presume that's all about can we do this or not, but it's now then been submitted to the Care Inspectorate. When do we expect to hear back from the Care Inspectorate to see that they are satisfied that your action plan will address the issues that they raised?
Thank you, Councillor. So as you say, the action plan has been submitted and they have accepted that action plan in terms of the activity that we're going to do. What they've advised is, because our action plan is quite tight in terms of timescales, we are going to have regular meetings with the link inspector for Aberdeen that is going to oversee. So in terms of timelines, as I say, it's very short because we didn't have a huge amount of recommendations. So there is just going to be regular meetings. Formally, when they sign it off, I'm not too sure at the moment.
No, that's fine. I mean, it was a very good report. You obviously had performed well over an extended period of time, but it's always nice to get reports like that signed off. But no, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I noticed that Councillor Stewart's back, but it looks like maybe you've frozen. Maybe if we could just take Councillor Gregg's question next.
Yep, thank you, Convener. the inspection report is really positive. So many thanks to the team for working so hard over the years. It takes years to achieve this kind of standard of quality achievement. So many thanks for that. And I think in particular, as is reflected in the report, there's very strong positive leadership, which is clearly highly effective. There's good organisation in place, and working through the LOIP is a real driver for change and has really been helpful. But I had a question about the improvement journey. From my reading, I understand that there needs to be improvement in self-assessment procedures. So could, is that being addressed? Is that within the delivery action plan? Will that be a challenge? That's clearly an important stage to get through. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. The work that we have done and which is in our action plan is our delivery plan, that's also our performance framework. So our performance framework was in draft when the inspection started. Of course, because of COVID, the work on that performance framework was paused. That is now finalised, it's embedded, and part of that performance framework is a quality assurance framework that sits within that. So that is, as you say, really tightening up on how we continually do that self-assessment to identify any weaknesses or any themes that were coming up and how we can respond to them very quickly. So that is something that has been done through the Performance Management Board. I chair it monthly, so that is something that we're looking at, and I oversee that self-assessment is continually present.
Okay, thank you for that. Clearly, these are important parts of the process to ensure that the successful delivery of CPO. So that's much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm not seeing any more questions or any more hands up for questions, but I noticed that Councillor Stewart has returned now. So maybe we'll just get agreement about the recommendations for report for item 14 on the agenda before we pass back to Councillor Stewart.
Agreed.
I think it's item 16, convener.
Is that all right? Sorry. Item 16, the inspection of justice social work services. So we're all agreed, that's fine. And back to you, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. I'm not on mute. Thank you very much. I've actually, not only did the doorbell go, but my computer's crashed as well. So I'm now on my phone. So hopefully everyone can hear me. So I might have to come back to you, Councillor Dunbar. I don't know what's happening. The computer's just crashed, but we'll soldier on just now. So thank you for all your assistance. So it's agenda item 17, and it's statutory appropriate adult services, pages 285 to 288.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
This is, oh.
On you go, Claire.
Okay.
I'm trying to catch up with myself, but please, on you go.
All right. This is to give an update. There was a report that came around the new statutory duty that we had placed upon us to provide appropriate adults. So this is to provide an update to the committee in terms of that service. So the extension of the appropriate adults, so historically this would have been a kind of, we responded to requests for appropriate adult, but the new legislation now places a statutory duty on us. So this, and it also widened out that it wasn't just the suspects of a crime, it actually widens it out to victims of crime as well. So this new statutory service is in place. The demand has not been as high as we would have expected probably due to the pandemic and the instance of crime and the crime levels being down. So we've not seen as much demand as we would have expected, but as we ease out of lockdown, I think we will probably start to see our figures increased. Obviously, we've had to get a performance framework in place because we will be inspected on this new statutory duty at some point. So the report just gives an overview of how we're continuing to meet our duties and give a bit of assurance around that. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Claire, for that. I can see one hand. Again, Derek, you might have to help me because it is on my phone. So Councillor Cameron, I think you have a question. I don't see anybody else at the moment.
Councillor Cameron, followed by Councillor Townsend, convener.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, convener. My question is at the bottom of page 286, it's 3.7, where there's a statement that says our intention was to scope the benefits of contracting out the appropriate adult service and proceed with a procurement process. I have some concerns that such a sensitive service should actually be contracted out. You know, in the years I've been involved with the council now, 9 years, and social work to start with, social work committee to start with, where we went through several years of looking at reclaiming social work and involving consultants, and ended up really going nowhere with that. It really worries me that we should even be contemplating contracting out, especially seeing that in the next page, in the next paragraph, we are making the post of appropriate adult coordinator a permanent post now, as opposed to a 12-month post, which I would applaud. Any comments in relation to where we are likely to go with contracting out? Because I, for one, certainly wouldn't feel comfortable with that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. In response to the thinking, just to give you a bit of history, so across Scotland, there's different models of how authorities meet their statutory duties. So some authorities have went down the road of a mixed model, whereas maybe during working hours it would be delivered by in-house, maybe out of hours it would be delivered by a commissioned service. Some authorities have chosen to commission the whole service out to commissioned services. Within the legislation, although you have to be trained to be an adult, an appropriate adult, there's not a minimum qualification. So actually, if you're using social workers, it is quite, you know, in terms of it's intensive and it's very time consuming. So it is really just, and this is why we wanted a bit of time to say, right, how is the best way to deliver the service for the best needs for the people that are going to be using it. In terms of the coordinator post, because it's statutory, as I say, we are going to be inspected on it. We have to have a very tight framework. There's a lot of data analysis to be collated, but there's also, we're responsible for the training of appropriate adults. So the coordinator post would be overseeing all of that work, whether it was commissioned out or not, because the duty still sits with us. You know, as we see the figures over the next year, I think we will take our time to decide how is the service best to be delivered. But I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for that. That gives me some comfort. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Cameron. And Claire, we will be coming back to this report then. Is it? Did you say it's 2 years? Would be a further 2 years before we looked at it, or would we be able to look at it before that?
Yes, I mean, we can. I'll take an update. And I think it would be interesting to come back and show how, you know, what has been the next 6 to 8 months looking like in terms of appropriate adults. So yes, we can definitely take an update around where things are. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just thinking ahead. So this is April. Would that be about October? So would it come back to the committee in October? Derek, could that be fitted in, or?
Sorry, sticky microphone, convener. Yes, we could schedule a reply back for either the 27th of October or the 7th of December, depending what perhaps best suits the service with their demands and other inspections that they have ongoing.
Okay. Sorry, Claire, you want to say something?
No, I was just going to say December might be better because it would give us a longer period to see how the figures proceed.
That's fine, because you did say 6 to 8 months here, so that would give us neither the 8 months. So
Okay.
that's fine. I think it would be helpful, and also taking on board what Councillor Cameron said. So, are there any other questions? Because I can't see any hands on my screen at the moment.
Convener, Councillor Townsend, my questions was answered and incorporated in Councillor Cameron's. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Councillor. I can't actually see. You've only got a few faces on my screen. This is when I say it's rubbish when you've got to do it on your phone, but never mind. Ever the resilient, adaptable Jennifer. There you go. Right. Can we then, members, just agree the recommendations as outlined in the paper, please?
Agreed.
Thank you, Councillor Dunbar. Thank you. Okay, so thanks very much, Claire. So we're moving on to Aberdeen Violence Against Women Partnership Progress Report. And that is, well, I'm not sure who's actually going to be speaking to that. I've got Derek McGowan down. Derek, is it yourself that's going to be speaking to that?
I think we have Ms. McNichol who's going to speak to it, unless Derek's now doing it.
Okay, I don't know if I've met Ms. McNichol. Oh, Derek, you're there.
I was, thanks, convener. I was just going to say what Mr. Jameson said there, that Lucy McNichol's here to talk to the report, but I'll be able to support her in that.
Okay, that's fine. So again, obviously, we had this is a report that will be for noting and endorsing information. Again, when it comes to women and violence against women, I think it's a very important report. But Ms. McNichol, the floor is yours. Hello, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Yes, so I'm here in place of our chair, who is DCI Karen McKellar, the author of the report. So this is just to provide you with a 6-month update on where the partnership is. Obviously, our primary focus has been the response to domestic abuse and violence against women services throughout the COVID pandemic. And we have obviously tried to ensure that work behind the scenes is going on with our action plan and strategy as well. You'll see from the report that there is an update for our 4 subgroups, which are focusing on data, learning and development, and then the priorities within our action plan, which link to the equally safe agenda. Some of these subgroups, the work has been a little bit delayed just because they are primarily getting run by the services who are working directly with those experiencing domestic abuse and violence against women, but we are making good traction with that and are hoping to have an updated action plan and strategy within the next couple of months, having ticked off a number of actions that have been ongoing throughout the last year. Our learning and development subgroup has been going really well, and we're planning a multi-agency violence against women conference in September, looking at the effects of the COVID pandemic throughout the last year, and looking at the learning that has come out from that. So we've got a couple of speakers lined up from Safe Lives, who are doing a project in Aberdeen just now called Whole Lives Aberdeen, looking at young people and their access to services around domestic abuse, and a speaker from RGU as well, who is doing a short-term piece of research on the effects of the COVID pandemic on domestic abuse services. I think at the last PPC committee, there had been some questions over data, and unfortunately, we are still in the process of working out a data dashboard and what can be shared to the public and wider. A lot of that data is police data, so it's unable to be used for public knowledge at the moment. So we are hoping to provide a further update in due course with a data dashboard, but just unfortunately we have the data there, we just can't provide context and a narrative to that yet, so that's why there's nothing attached to the report for that currently. There's also a draft risk register attached to the papers, which you'll see that we've been working on. This was discussed at our last partnership meeting last week, and there's a few amendments to be made for that, and once those are done, it will be agreed by the partnership and finalised. Obviously that will be a working document and will be regularly updated, but you can see from the risk register that there are still some significant areas of work to be done within the partnership in terms of mitigating risks and looking at the impact on the citizens of Aberdeen and those who are experiencing domestic abuse. That's all I think in terms of an update, but if anyone's got any questions, happy to take them.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there will be some questions regarding this item. But seeing some hands now, I had something myself that gone out of my mind. So I see Councillor Cameron. Cameron, your hand is up.
Thank you very much, convener. It's more a comment than anything else. I thought the report was very good. We seem to be moving absolutely in the right direction, which is great. And my comment's something you've heard me speak about numerous times in the past, and that is that the abuse is. I do realise that the organisation who's doing this is abuse against women. But it's really gender-based abuse, and sometimes there are men who are abused, and just to not lose sight of that. But having said that, I thought the report was exceptionally good. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cameron. I don't really think I would be in favour of changing the title in any way to say just gender abuse. I mean, because the reality is the vast majority of abuse is against women. I am not saying there isn't abuse against men. I'm not disregarding that at all. But I think this particular report is very much about women and information.
Sorry, convener, I'll stop you there. I was not suggesting that at all. Absolutely not. But I think we mustn't lose sight of that. That's all. And sometimes
Cameron, I didn't actually think it was in your gift to stop me, but
sorry, I did. Anyway, you know very well I didn't mean it like that, convener.
No, I'll take it that way. It's just the reason I'm saying part of what I'm saying as well is that I have attended. I know there's multi agencies, but I have attended some online presentations, and I'm just going to highlight one of which I know. I think there's 22 partnerships, as Councillor Dunbar has informed me, that from Grampian Women's Aid, that domestic abuse, has been particularly on the increase, and violence against women during this pandemic period, and women have suffered more being at home. A lot of women have lost their jobs, being in sort of lower paid jobs, and have lost their jobs, are furloughed, are stuck at home, and don't have a place to go. There are some very interesting online, I wrote the YouTube because that's where I saw them displaying situations that actually happen for women, and the coercive control that women have endured. I'll leave it like that. It's a very difficult subject, and as you know, I had a friend who was murdered through domestic abuse not that long ago. Excuse me, not that long ago. Moving on,
Thank you, convener. And yeah, we acknowledge that, Councillor Stewart, and the work we do as well.
Thank you. Derek, do you see any other hands?
Certainly, convener, I'll assist you there. We have Councillor Allard, followed by Councillor Houghton.
Okay, Councillor Allard.
Thank you very much, convener. Yeah, a couple of points. First of all, 2.1b, know that in future an annual assurance report will be presented to the committee by the chief officer. I just wanted to make sure, convener, and to the partnership, that there will be opportunities for not only service update, but to come in front of committee and maybe put something on the agenda during the year. Particularly, you just said, Ms. McNichol, about updates which needs not only to be done by email, but maybe will need you to come back in front of committee to explain better, especially if something happened, not only things which have not been dealt with in the report because of a lack of time, but it's a year is a long time, so I would want that reassurance. And my second point will be on page 290. Sorry, my second point will be on page 293.4, which is the media campaign initiative that have been crucial during the period of COVID with regards to preventative messages, and also ensuring victims are aware of the support and assistance available to them. I found it very, very interesting the amount of work has been done, particularly 16 days of action campaign, which was very welcome. And I love the idea that a lot of things are coming now through our television, our local press, and on social media. Something I would like some comments on a point of information. The partnership doesn't seem to have a direct action with our local media, our local press. I have to find the Press and Journal today, for example, and I did online on social media, putting on front page some incident that happened regarding violence towards women, both in the North edition and the Northeast edition. And how much do we encourage them to do that? Not to put these stories deep into the newspaper and relegate it to some obscure article, but put right there on the front page, because if it's unacceptable, like we all agree that it's unacceptable in 2021 to have that level of violence towards women, surely it should be always on front page. So how much do we do that? I know that we spend money to try to put our message across, but how much do we encourage and maybe ask them to join the partnership, to be part of this change? Because on page 350, it says that a culture shift must take place across all sectors of society. That culture shift can only happen if it's there on the front page. If you can have some help on the both way, on the possibility of you coming back to the committee during the year, and on the local media being more involved in the partnership, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Allard. Yeah, I mean, we're always developing different approaches and comms as to how we can increase our knowledge of the partnership and, you know, affect the outcomes that we are hoping to achieve. We obviously have regular contacts with the media, and because we work in a partnership, sometimes that will go through the police, sometimes that will go through Aberdeen City Council, sometimes that we GWA, and we always try to reference that, you know, we are members of the Aberdeen Violence Against Women Partnership, so that the public are aware of us and trying to see what we are doing. But yeah, absolutely, we've just kind of agreed a comm strategy that looks at how we incorporate the media more into what we're doing, so that we can work towards that attitude change, like you're saying.
Thank you very much, Lucy. I agree there needs to be an attitude change, but, you know, I'm going to be bold here. Until women are seen as equal and not punch bags, I think we've still got a long way to go, and we need women and children not to experience violence. I think that's the reality. I would, however, compliment you, Councillor Allard, and some of your line of thought. I think on a committee like this, where there's 4 women and the rest are men. I'm not talking about officers. It is refreshing to hear questions from men regarding violence against women. And something else you said, Councillor Allard, it had actually been in my intention, as some other members know, that I would like to try, and Derek, this will be for you to key into, is to have some sort of presentation, whether it's a multi-agency approach, whether it's a workshop, whether it comes to the committee, because I think we need to actually learn to feel the pain the same way that we have reading in the corporate parenting, the angst of children. We really need to be at the forefront in championing women and the fight against the fight against violence against them and in the home. So I'm not sure how we can actually move that forward, whether it is a presentation, if we're still online or hybrid or whatever. I'm sure there'll be a way to offer some sort of workshop. So I would like that to be maybe put in the committee planner or somewhere, at least minuted, so that we can have officers to take it forward.
Yeah, thank you, convener.
Thank you. I see Councillor Dunbar. Derek, I don't know if you can help me.
Yes, not a problem, convener. To pick up on your workshop planner entry, I'll follow this up off table with Mr. Bell and with the Violence Against Women Partnership and Mr. McGowan. The group are heavily involved in reporting through the Executive Group for Public Protection. So there are synergies and interfaces that could come forward to this committee at the later date as you propose, convener. To go back to the hands up, Councillor Houghton, followed by Councillor Dunbar.
Thank you, Councillor Houghton.
Thank you, convener, and thanks, Ms McNichol, for a very thorough, needed and interesting report. I just have two questions. My first one is, I was interested on the kind of plans and strategies for helping women escape violence, and as the convener mentioned as well, children as well who are often involved in this. One of the initiatives that I noticed at the start of the lockdown period was train companies banding together to offer essentially free train travel away for women fleeing domestic abuse. Do you know if there's any intentions for that to continue in the future? And I just have one other question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Houghton. I'm not aware at the moment of it not continuing. It's something that I can find out though and get back to you about, because yeah, I think certainly it's definitely been really helpful to those who have had to leave the family home at short notice, and definitely been beneficial in terms of what the feedback I think we've had through the domestic abuse services from service users. So I will get back to you on that one if that's okay.
That's great. No, I absolutely agree. I think resources cannot be a barrier for people escaping violence. And then my other question was just to yourself in terms of, obviously this is something you're deeply involved with the partner agencies. What do you think is maybe one thing that we perhaps misunderstand about this area or about the topic, and perhaps the public in general misunderstand? Just wanted to give you the opportunity to maybe highlight something to us.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. I think there's still this this kind of myth that it's a family situation and that nobody else should get involved. It needs to be kind of sorted out between the two parties involved. I think we need to kind of move away from that and look towards a more community approach. So we've got the disclosure scheme, that's Police Scotland initiative, where you can find out about the background of a partner. And I think there's a lot of misinformation around about that, where people think it's only the partner of the perpetrator, potential perpetrator, who can request that information, when actually anyone can request that, whether it's a neighbour, family member, work colleague. You know, it's really, if you are concerned about the safety of somebody, then you can request that information, and then what you do with that, whether you pass that on to the person in question, is kind of up to you, or the police can do that for you. So we are looking at some kind of comms campaigns around that to highlight that, so that we are making domestic abuse everybody's business is the kind of phrase that I want to use, because we know that it filters down into all areas of society. You know, it can affect women in the workplace and men in the workplace as well. It can, you know, the gender inequality is a massive issue in terms of perpetrating domestic abuse. So it's really about that, just kind of making it everybody's business and getting people on board in terms of helping with that cultural and attitude change towards how we view those who experience domestic abuse. I think that's probably the big thing for me.
Thank you. That's really interesting, especially around, I suppose it's in the name, isn't it, domestic, so we kind of automatically kind of assume it's just between the two parties at the home, as it were, whereas you're absolutely right, that's not the case. So no, thank you, Mr. Nichols. Thank you, convener.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Was it Councillor Dunbar? Am I right?
Sorry, I had just put my hand up, Councillor Stewart, because I thought you were going to move to the recommendations, and Councillor Houghton still had his hand up, but Derek fortunately had picked up on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Dunbar. I mean, literally, I've just got a few faces on my phone screen, so I can't really see everything, but thank you for that. So I think we've had a fair enough discussion. Are you happy to note and endorse the recommendations regarding this report, members?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. McNichol, for your contribution. Thank you very much. And Mr. McGowan as well. Okay, thank you. So moving on, which I think is the last report, to agenda item 19, which is the EU exit and our current position. Well, as you know, that our membership to the EU ceased at the end of the year, and end of last year. There was a transition period. The council actually has an exit group, which is now on standby should any situation arise that we require the exit group. Mr. Bell, would you want to take us through a little bit more of that?
Yeah, thank you, convener. So the report provides a further update on the civil contingency arrangements that we put in place in preparation for EU exit. And this has been managed not just at a local level, but of course at the regional level and a national level too. Certainly in the lead up to the initial EU exit dates, we worked very closely with our partners at the Local Resilience Partnership, just looking at the reasonable worst case scenarios that could arise from a no deal EU exit. And then with the partnership, we looked to identify mitigating actions that we could put in place. We set up an EU exit group within the council, as set out in the report, and we carried out a similar exercise, but looking at it from a single agency perspective, an Aberdeen City Council perspective. And so we felt as a group we were well placed to manage any implications arising from EU exit. As you'll recall, going into the Christmas period last year, it wasn't entirely clear whether or not we would end up with a deal at the end of the transition period. And so as you highlighted there, convener, we set up an incident management team that was on standby should it have been required over the Christmas and New Year period to address any significant issues that may have arisen from the end of the transition deal. Thankfully, that wasn't required. As set out in the report, the UK government announced on Christmas Eve that agreement had been reached between EU and UK colleagues, and we left the transition period on the 31st of December and entered into the new arrangements between the two institutions. We haven't left it there, so although we've stood down our EU exit group in terms of regular meetings, we're continuing to maintain situational awareness across the piece through COSLA, through the Local Resilience Partnership here in Grampian, through bodies such as the Local Authority Resilience Group Scotland, and as well as our professional networks. And of course, Mr. Morrison, who was on earlier on, spoke about the close work that he's doing at a national level through his professional networks. So all of this is allowing us to monitor the potential for any emerging risks arising from EU exit and indeed any issues that we may need to respond to. So I hope that provides a helpful summary in terms of what's in the report, and of course happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Yeah, I do think it has, it puts it in context. I think the report is kind of self-explanatory, and it is helpful to know where we're at, but I'm sure there's a couple of questions. Councillor Allard, you have a question for Mr. Bell?
Yeah, thank you very much, Convener. Yeah, thank you very much for this, Mr. Bell. It's been very reassuring to know that there is a group which looks at it, and I'm quite happy with the continued reassurance that the group will still be there, just in case things happen. As Mr. Morrison said earlier on, there are still a lot of dates to come regarding implementation of some of what has been decided. There is even some cases that negotiations are not finished in of these cases, or there is even a will for some parties to renegotiate some of the things which have been negotiated again. So the implication of all this will be very much coming in the next few months till the end of the year, or maybe thereafter. So I would encourage you, Convener, to agree with Mr. Bell on that, but we need to have regular updates about what's happening regarding these dates, and being reassured that that group is looking at it very closely. One of the things that, you know, Mr. Bell, I've been always being very concerned about is date the 31st of June, which is, of course, the last date for people to apply for settled status. A lot of people are working in Aberdeen City Council. We don't know yet if everybody would have applied. We don't know yet if all our citizens in Aberdeen would have applied for this for this status. I'm still very worried that some people could be left behind. So that's a date which is coming very fast at us, and I just wanted to make sure that we are finding ways how to communicate this. I do it myself on social media as much as I can, as Aberdeen City Council, thinking of communicating, increasing that communication when we arrive to the deadline. And yes, and any of the things that you think would be interesting for us to know in the meetings to come before the end of the year on the dates of implementation will be interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, happy if the committee is minded to bring further updates at a later date. In terms of the EU settlement scheme, yeah, that is a date on the diary that we're aware of, and certainly colleagues and people in organisation in particular are playing their part in terms of trying to make sure that any staff that may be impacted by the deadline there are fully aware of their rights and the processes that are in place. And so we've been doing a significant amount of communication on that side of things. Other dates that come to mind, in particular for me, is the decision that would need to be made around data between EU and the United Kingdom. So we're anticipating a deal between the EU and the UK that would allow data to flow freely as it currently is at the moment. And that would require what's called an adequacy decision, whereby the EU recognises that the UK's data protection legislation is adequate and they're willing for the free sharing of data. So we're monitoring that one very closely, because obviously there would be potential implications there, not just for the local authority, but other organisations across the country. But as I say, the signs are that we will get that adequacy decision from the EU that would allow the business to continue as it is at the moment. So I think in terms of the specific dates, Councillor Allard, the EU settlement scheme is definitely up there. The other one that I've got my eye on is the adequacy decision, which we're hoping to get before the end of June.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Bell. Thank you, Councillor Allard. I see Councillor Cameron's hand up. I'm not sure if there's any other hands, Derek.
Councillor Cameron is the remaining hand. Thank you.
Thank you. I know some others have to go for another meeting. I am aware of that. So, Councillor Cameron.
Thank you very much, Convener. My question now seems rather trivial after Councillor Allard's, which was a very major one, but I'm going for it anyway. Page 332, 311, there's a statement here saying that no issues or risks relating to EU exit have been escalated to the risk board. I'm absolutely not disputing that statement. I'm quite sure Mr. Bell wouldn't make statements like that without meaning them. But I wonder, is this because our officers are involved with the implications of these changes? They've just got on with the job. You know, for example, fish export certificates by environmental health. Previous report, there's certain enforcement activities have been placed on hold due to the extra COVID-19 commitments. And we're moving towards a situation where in September this year, probably all the normal environmental health, food enforcement issues will be back on board for their regular inspections, etc. And this could, when this happens, create a problem if nothing is resolved in terms of the fish export certificates. So question is, are we cited on the fact that our officers may well be just getting on with the job and there are actually underlying problems there that we perhaps need to be more aware of?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Bell. I see your head nodding, so I kind of thought they were getting on with the job. But anyway.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, getting on with the job, but I would say that there's adequate supervision there as well. So although the EU exit group isn't meeting on a monthly basis, we still have an active team site where we're sharing information on a regular basis, and there's clear processes in place that should we require to get around the table sooner rather than later to deal with a risk that perhaps we don't feel our existing controls are adequate enough to manage, the members of the group are clear that they can raise that and escalate that, and we can call a meeting to resolve the matter swiftly. Mr. Morrison's come on the screen too, so he might be able to deal with the more detailed aspect of your query.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison.
Yes, thank you, convener. Locally, the current demand for certification is within our ability to respond to, primarily because of the hubs. The hubs have taken a huge pressure off, and instead of having, 20 certificates a day, which would have been undeliverable, we're looking at, an attestation every few months. So that is controlling that to a large extent. You are absolutely correct, Councillor Cameron, that when we restart, there's going to be that conflict between the routine official controls and these. We are keeping that under control, and SVELC is keeping a strong eye on that as well. We have an exports working group in place to try and make sure that we are keeping a handle on that. For Aberdeen, the risks, I think, are lower. Some other authorities, they have a far greater number of certificates still to do, and I think they will really face a pinch point.
Okay, no, thank you both for that. That was very useful. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and I'm not